Welcome, dear listener, to another cozy night with Sleepytime stories. Find a comfortable spot, slip on your headphones, and adjust the volume to a gentle murmur. Take a slow, deep breath in and let it out, soft as moonlight on still waters. Allow the world to drift away, and let this tale rock you toward peaceful dreams. The master and his pupil once upon a time, in a quiet, misty corner of an old English village, there lived a wise and mysterious man whom the townspeople simply called the master. No one knew exactly where he came from or how old he was or what he did for a living. He lived alone in a cottage covered in ivy, tucked behind a row of ancient oak trees. Inside that little home were shelves and shelves of books bound in worn leather, filled with strange languages and whispered secrets of the world. And among those books was one that the master kept locked away in a chest bound with chains, a book darker and older than all the rest. He called it the Black Book of Power. Now, the master was not unkind. In fact, he was known to teach the occasional clever child who came asking for wisdom. And so it happened that one day, a young boy named Thomas came to live and learn under the master's roof. Thomas was curious, very curious. He had hair like golden straw and eyes full of questions. He swept the floors, fed the fire, dusted the ancient shelves, and when allowed sat cross-legged on the floor to listen as the master read aloud from the books of nature, weather, stars, and time. But always, the Black Book remained untouched. One rainy evening, as the wind howled gently outside and the fire danced in the hearth, Thomas finally asked, "Master, why is that one book chained shut?" The old man looked up from his reading. His eyes, grey as storm clouds, narrowed slightly. "That book," he said, "is not meant for hands that do not know restraint. It holds secrets, dangerous ones, spells, names, and invocations that once spoken aloud cannot be unsaid." Thomas gulped. He nodded. But deep inside him, a flicker of temptation was lit. The days passed, then weeks, and the whispers of the Black Book seemed to grow louder in the silence. One morning, the master packed a small satchel. "I must travel to the next town," he said, "to fetch ingredients for an important elixir. I shall be gone until nightfall." He placed a bony finger in the air and warned, "Do not go near the chest, do not open it, do not read the book." And with that, he stepped out into the morning fog and was gone. Thomas stood alone in the cottage, the ticking clock echoing like a heartbeat. For a long time, he swept, cleaned, and read from the safer books. But then his eyes drifted toward the corner to the chest, the chained one. His feet moved almost of their own will. Closer until he stood right before it. The lock seemed old, the chains loose, and near the top, wedged between the lid and the edge, was a small iron key. Perhaps the master had been careless, or perhaps this was a test. Heart pounding, Thomas slid the key into the lock. Click. The chains fell away. The lid creaked open. Inside was a book black as a moonless night, its cover smooth like polished stone, and glowing faintly with a red, ember-like shimmer. He opened it. The pages were covered in strange symbols, looped and jagged like vines made of fire. And then his eyes landed on a word. A name. It was written in bold, crimson letters. Beelzebub. Thomas whispered it under his breath, not really meaning to, almost as if the word had pulled itself from his lips. Suddenly the fire dimmed. The clock stopped. And in the corner of the room, the air began to shiver. The floorboards creaked, the walls sighed, and in the growing shadows, something moved. From the darkest corner of the room, a tall, bent figure emerged, horned, hollow-eyed, and made of smoke and cinders. Its mouth curled into a grin. "You called me, boy," it said. The creature stood in the corner, tall and shadowy, its horns curling like thorn vines, its eyes two glowing coals in a face that had no true shape. Its voice was smooth and low and heavy like thunder just before a storm breaks. "You called me, boy," it said again, taking a single, silent step forward. Thomas took a step back. He could feel the cold now. It wasn't the cold of wind or rain, but the kind that sinks into your bones when you've done something wrong and cannot take it back. I didn't mean to," Thomas stammered. "I was just reading, just curious." The creature laughed. Not loud, but low and crackling. "Curiosity," it whispered, "is how the door always opens." And then it held out a hand. Long, thin fingers with claws like silver needles. "Give me another name, boy," it said, "and I'll grant you something in return." Thomas's mouth went dry. "A name?" he asked. "Yes, a name spoken from your lips, and I shall give you gold or power or secrets that only the stars know." Thomas shook his head. He knew enough tales to know where this would lead. But the black book in his hands fluttered. Its pages moved on their own, as if the wind turned them from within. Another name appeared. Astaroth. And though he didn't mean to, his lips brushed the word again, Astaroth. The shadows grew deeper. A second shape stepped from the wall. Smaller, thinner, with wings like broken glass and a laugh that chilled the air. Thomas turned. He slammed the book shut. The names stopped moving, but the room was no longer quiet. Now two spirits stood before him, one tall and smoky, the other sharp and flickering. The fire in the hearth went out. The ticking clock still did not tick. And far, far off he could hear something else. Footsteps. The master was returning. Thomas ran to the chest, threw the black book inside, and yanked the chain shut. The key he flung into the fireless hearth. He turned around, but the shadows were gone. The two creatures no longer visible. Only the echo of their voices lingered in the corners. "We're not gone, boy," they seemed to whisper. "Only waiting." The door creaked open. The master stepped in, his cloak damp with fog, his satchel slung over one shoulder. He paused. He looked around. He sniffed the air. And then his eyes met Thomas's. Not angry, not surprised, but sad. "You opened it," he said softly. Thomas lowered his head. "Yes." The master sighed. He walked slowly to the hearth, knelt, and picked the iron key out from the ashes. "You said it," he murmured. "You said the names, but I didn't mean to," Thomas said, his voice trembling. "They just came out. I didn't know it." "No one ever knows," the master interrupted. "That's why the book stays closed." He stood again, older than before somehow, tired, and then he walked to the chest. He didn't open it. He only placed his hand on the lid and whispered a word that Thomas did not recognize. The chains turned black, then vanished. The book inside was sealed once more, but the room still felt colder, heavier, like something had changed forever. "You're clever, Thomas," said the master. "Too clever for your own safety." Thomas stood in silence. Then he asked, "What happens now?" The master studied him, long and hard. "You must stay, you must learn, you must know how to close what you opened, because there may come a time when the names you spoke try to speak yours in return. and with that, he lit the fire again. The shadows danced. The wind moved on, and Thomas sat beside the flames, his heart full of questions and the black book locked away for now. For many weeks, Thomas stayed close to the master. He swept the floors, tended the herbs, read his lessons by candlelight, and did not speak of the black book again. But deep in his mind he remembered the names, the voices, the moment the air turned cold. One morning, as the mist cooled softly at the edges of the forest, Thomas asked the master, "Have you ever used the names?" The master paused. He didn't answer immediately. He poured warm water into 2 mugs and added crushed lavender and honey. Then, sitting by the fire, he said, "Yes, once." Thomas leaned forward, listening. "I was young, younger than you even," the master said. "And I too thought I could control what I called. But what happened?" The master stared into the flames. They listened and they waited. Then he looked at Thomas. And they never forget. Thomas shivered. It was not from the cold. That night, he lay in bed beneath thick wool blankets, the fire burning low, when he heard it again. A whisper, thought, right at the edge of sleep. Thomas. He sat upright. Nothing there. Just the sound of wind through the shutters. But when he turned to the hearth there was a flicker. A shimmer in the air like heat on stone. And the scent not firewood, but something ancient. Ashes and parchment. He didn't speak. He didn't move. And slowly it faded. The next morning, Thomas returned to his lessons. He read of symbols that could unbind or seal, of languages that only dreams could speak, of creatures older than time itself called not by power, but by curiosity. And with each day, he grew wiser, more careful, more still. One day, years later, when the master was old and his beard had turned the color of snow, he handed Thomas the key, the same iron key that once locked the black book. "It is yours now," the master said quietly. "But remember, a name is not a toy, it is a door, and a door, once opened He trailed off. Thomas nodded. He placed the key in a box wrapped in cloth and placed it high upon a shelf. Then he watched the sun rise over the foggy trees. And though the book remained locked sometimes, on still nights he heard a whisper in the wind, "Thomas, we remember you." But he would say nothing in return. For now he knew some things are best left unanswered. Titty Mouse and Tatty Mouse once upon a time, in a quiet little nook under the floorboards of an old cottage, there lived 2 tiny friends, Titty Mouse and Tatty Mouse. They were as close as sisters, always chattering, always giggling, and always looking out for one another. Their home was the coziest you could ever imagine: a walnut shell bed, a rose petal blanket, and a teacup table carved from an old thimble. Sunlight would stream through the cracks in the wood above, and warm breezes would hum lullabies through the walls. One sunny afternoon, Titty Mouse was cooking their supper, a warm bowl of porridge, bubbling in a tiny nutshell pot over a matchstick fire. Tatty Mouse was humming a tune, folding little scraps of cloth into napkins, getting the table ready. "Oh, this porridge smells lovely," said Tatty. "It's nearly ready," Titty replied, lifting the tiniest spoon you've ever seen. Just then, with a wobble and a splash, Titty Mouse dropped the spoon into the pot, and the porridge spilled all over the floor. "Oh dear," cried Tatty Mouse, slipping on the gooey mess and bumping into the cupboard. The cupboard door flung open with a creak, and out rolled a wooden button. The the button hit the rolling pin. The rolling pin knocked over the acorn flower, and thump, the flour sack landed on the broom. The broom tipped and hit the little water jug. Crash! The jug shattered into pieces. "Oh no," said Titty Mouse, rubbing her head. "Oh no," whispered Titty Mouse, eyes wide. The two stood very still. The quiet had returned, but something felt strange now. Something uneasy. The broken jug sparkled in the light. The air smelled of warm oats, and neither mouse said a word for a while. "I'll sweep it up," said Titty softly. "I'll find another jug," said Tatty, though her voice trembled just a little. They didn't know it yet, but that little spill was only the beginning. The spilled porridge had been wiped. The broken jug was swept into a neat little pile. Titty Mouse sighed. Tatty Mouse smiled a tired smile. "All is well," they said together. And for a little while it truly was. But trouble has a way of tiptoeing on tiny feet. Later that evening, a kind little friend came by the black beetle wearing his shiny red waistcoat. He had come for a visit and brought 2 crumbs of honey cake. But when he stepped inside, his sharp little eyes saw the pile of broken jug near the hearth. "What happened here?" he asked in a hum. Titty Mouse explained with a twitch of her whiskers. "Oh my," said the beetle, and in his haste to turn around, he knocked over the fire tongs. The tongs clattered and swung clink, clank, and knocked into the shelf, which knocked the broom, which hit the door, which opened wide and let in the wind. The wind rushed in like a wild whisper. It twirled the curtains. It tossed the tablecloth. It spun the dishes and whoosh, blew the flour sack right out the window. "Oh dear," cried Tatty Mouse. "Not the flour, oh no," gasped Titty Mouse. "We'll have no bread for morning." And in came another visitor, the little sparrow, flitting in through the open door. "What's all this noise?" he chirped. The wind tugged his feathers and the mess made him nervous. "I don't like this," he chirped. "Not at all." And with a sharp flutter he dashed across the room and accidentally tipped over the little stool. The stool hit the drawer hit the candlestick, and the candlestick wobbled and fell right onto the floor, its wax snapping like dry twigs. "I'm sorry," chirped the sparrow, and he flew right out again, gone into the darkening sky. The mice looked around. The porridge was gone. The jug was gone. The flour was gone. And now the candle, too. "Oh dear," said Tatty Mouse. "Maybe we should just go to bed," whispered Titty Mouse, her voice barely louder than a sigh. They crept under their rose petal covers. The room was a mess. The night was quiet, but not for long, because just outside the door someone new was coming. Someone big and clumsy and full of questions. Now the wind had calmed. The curtains no longer danced. Titty Mouse and Tatty Mouse lay under their covers still and quiet, though sleep had not come. But just as the hush settled over their tiny home, there came a sound. A thump, then a shuffle, then a sniff. "Who's there?" whispered Tatty Mouse. The door creaked open slowly, and in came the big brown rat. He wasn't mean, just curious. His whiskers twitched as he looked around. He saw the broken jug, the flour gone, the stool on its side, the candlestick snapped in half. "What a bother," said the big brown rat. Then he stepped inside, his heavy feet making the floorboards moan. "But what's this?" he muttered. He leaned against the table to peer at the mess, and with one big creak and a loud crack, the leg of the table gave way. Crash! Down it went. The teacups tumbled. The saucer smashed. The lost bit of cheese rolled across the floor and out the door. "Oh no," said Titty Mouse. "This is just too much," cried Tatty Mouse. And right then, as if the house itself agreed, there came a great big rumble. The window shutters banged shut. The door slammed open again. The shelf above the bed began to lean. And before you could squeak or blink, the whole little house fell down. Down it went. Crumble, crackle, snap. The broom rolled. Fire tongues tumbled. The flour sack floated off on the wind. And in the middle of the mess stood the two mice side by side, tails curled close, whiskers drooping. "Well," said Tatty Mouse, brushing dust from her ear, "that's the end of that." Titty Mouse nodded. "But at least," she said softly, "we still have each other." And the moon, high above, peeked through the clouds, casting gentle silver light over the ruins of their little home. The black beetle came back with crumbs. The little sparrow returned to help pick up petals. Even the big brown rat, feeling quite sorry indeed, offered a matchstick bean to help rebuild. And by the time morning mist rolled over the fields, the mice had a new home, smaller, simpler, but filled with kindness, care, and quiet joy. And at night, when the fireflies blinked in the hedges and the stars twinkled in the sky, Titty Mouse and Tatty Mouse would curl up once more, side by side, and whisper, "No matter how the porridge spilled, home is where we're safe together." Jack and his golden snuff box. Once upon a time, in a quiet cottage nestled near the edge of a green forest, there lived an old man and his 3 sons. The old man was wise and gentle, but he was poor, and the family had only a little land and a single cow to live upon. As the old man grew older, he knew the time was coming when he would have to choose which son would care for the house and land. So he called them together one morning, his voice steady but kind. "My sons," he said, "you are all grown now, and I have little to offer each of you. But the one who brings me the most valuable thing from the wide world, he shall have this house, and the land, and my blessing." And now the eldest son, brave and proud, nodded without a word and left the very next morning with a small bag on his back. The second son, clever and quick, soon followed with dreams in his eyes. But the youngest son, his name was Jack, he lingered for a while. Jack was gentle, and though he had little learning, his heart was full of wonder. "Be careful, Jack," said his father. "The world is wide and strange." And so Jack set off with nothing but a crust of bread in his pocket and a strong belief that kindness might guide him further than cleverness or pride. Out Jack walked and walked through green meadows and quiet woods, past singing brooks and over mossy stones. On the 3rd day, as the sun began to dip low in the sky, he came to a large house made of grey stone and ivy. It looked more like a castle than a cottage, and out front stood an old woman, stooped and dressed in dark rags, with eyes that shimmered like candlelight. "Good day, mother," Jack said kindly. "May I rest here a while?" The old woman squinted at him. "Aye," she said slowly, "if you'll help me feed the fire and sweep the floor." Jack smiled. "Of course." He swept her hearth, chopped some wood, and gave the fire a good stir. Then the old woman placed before him a bowl of stew, thick and warm. She watched him eat with a curious gaze, then said in a low voice, "You've got a kind soul, young man, and for that I'll give you something precious." She reached deep into her shawl and drew out a small golden box no bigger than a matchbox. It gleamed in the firelight. "This," she whispered, "is a snuff box, but not just any snuff box. Inside lives a spirit, a helper of great power. If ever you need anything, just open the lid and say, 'Come, come, little spirit, come at my call, and do what I ask you, one and all.'" Jack looked at the box in wonder. It was smooth and cold in his hands, with a tiny golden latch. "But listen well," she added, her eyes narrowing. "You must never lose it. Guard it as you would your own life." And with that, the old woman vanished. Just like that, gone. Jack looked all around, but there was only silence and the soft flicker of firelight behind him. Clutching the snuff box tightly, he stepped back onto the road, his heart a mix of wonder and just a little fear. Crescent moon as the stars came out overhead, Jack made camp beneath an oak tree, his thoughts drifting to the journey ahead, to the father he wanted to make part, and to the tiny golden box tucked safely beneath his coat. He didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of an adventure far stranger and far more magical than he had ever dreamed. The sun rose gently through the trees, bathing the forest floor in golden light. Jack awoke beneath the old oak tree, feeling a strange warmth in his chest, as if the snuff box itself had kept him safe through the night. He stretched, tucked the golden box deeper into his pocket, and began his walk once more. Out by noon, Jack reached a bustling town, filled with colorful awnings, chatter, and music. But Jack had no coin, only the mysterious gift in his coat. As he passed a grand palace with shining marble columns, he saw a commotion near the gates. A royal messenger stood crying out, "His Majesty seeks a gift more marvelous than gold, the rarest thing in the land. Whoever brings it to him shall be richly rewarded." Jack's heart fluttered. Perhaps this was it, the moment he had been walking toward. So, with steady hands, he stepped into a quiet alley, pulled out the snuff box, and opened the lid. The inside shimmered with a soft, glowing mist. Taking a breath, Jack whispered the words, "Come, come, little spirit, come at my call, and do what I ask you, one and all." And just like that, the air trembled. From inside the golden box, a tiny figure emerged, not taller than Jack's hand, but cloaked in shimmering robes, with eyes like starlight. "What do you wish, kind master?" the spirit asked, its voice like a breeze through wind chimes. Jack bowed his head. "I need a gift," he said, "something rare and wonderful, something that would amaze a king." The spirit nodded once and vanished. Moments later, in Jack's hand, appeared a dazzling bird, its feathers woven from sunlight and sapphire, its song sweeter than any Jack had ever heard. It fluttered in his palms light as a whisper. Sparkles, Jack thanked the spirit and gently closed the box. Then he walked boldly to the palace gates. The guards, at first doubtful, soon found themselves entranced by the beauty of the bird Jack carried. They led him to the king, who sat on a golden throne surrounded by jewels, maps, and treasures. But when he saw the bird, his eyes widened. "It sings," the king murmured, "and its feathers, they shimmer like the sun and the sea." Jack knelt. "This is my gift, your majesty." The king leaned forward. "Who are you, boy?" "I am just Jack," he said, "the youngest of 3 sons come to seek my fortune." The king smiled. "Then let this be the beginning. I shall give you a purse of gold, a fine horse, and a promise that if you bring me 2 more wonders such as this, I shall make you rich beyond your dreams." Jack bowed deeply. His heart beat fast, but the snuff box lay warm and steady in his coat. Dizzy that night, in a room finer than anything he had known, Jack lay beneath silk covers and looked out at the moon. The snuff box rested beside him, and though the spirit inside was silent, Jack whispered, "Thank you truly." But little did he know that eyes had been watching jealous eyes. A greedy servant, hidden in shadow near the door, had seen Jack open the box, had watched the spirit appear, and now plans were forming. Crescent Moon far from home, with only a golden box to protect him, Jack had begun to win the favor of kings, but soon he would have to face betrayal, loss, and the greatest test of all, would the spirit stay loyal when the snuff box falls into the wrong hands? The palace was quiet, but not still. In the velvet hush of night, as the moon poured silver over the rooftops, a shadow crept into Jack's chamber. The greedy servant, the one who had seen the spirit, watched the snuff box glimmer tiptoe past the sleeping boy. With trembling fingers, he reached beneath Jack's pillow and stole the golden box. Dashing away by morning, Jack awoke to an empty space beside him. The snuff box gone. His heart sank. He searched the bed, the floor, the shelves, the window ledge, nothing. Panic filled his chest. He rushed to the gods, but no one had seen anything. He pleaded with the king, but without proof or magic in his hands, Jack was only a boy with a story. The king's gaze grew colder. "You promised wonders," he said. "You brought one, but the next?" Jack opened his palms. They were empty. "I'll find it," Jack said softly, his voice shaking. "Please give me time." The king frowned. "You may have 3 days, bring me a second wonder, or leave this kingdom in disgrace." So Jack set out, his heart heavy, his feet dragging on the dusty route. With no money, no horse, and no spirit to call, he was just Jack again. But he didn't stop. He asked the townsfolk. He searched every alley, every market, every stable. He followed rumors, whispers, even dreams. At last, deep in a hollow beneath the hills, he heard the faintest hum. He climbed through tangled roots and ducked under a mossy arch, and there a figure stood in the shadows. It was the spirit, dimmer now, weaker, but still there. "Death!" Jack cried, falling to his knees. "You're alive, but why didn't you come to me?" The spirit lifted its eyes. "They called me with greed, not kindness," it whispered. "They used me for vanity, not wonder." Jack reached forward gently. "I never meant to lose you, I'm sorry." The spirit looked at him for a long moment, and then it smiled. "You remember me," it said. "And you came not for power, but to make things right." With a soft shimmer, the spirit brightened, and the golden snuff box appeared again, floating between them. "I returned to the one who treated me as a friend," it said. Sparkles, Jack held the box close to his heart, and together they returned to the palace. He arrived just as the 3rd day ended. The king stood in his hall, bored and unimpressed. "Another empty promise," he scoffed. But Jack simply smiled. He opened the box and softly whispered, "Come, come, little spirit, come at my call, and do what I ask you, one and all." A breeze swept through the hall. The tapestries fluttered. Then, with a swirl of light, a great tree grew from the marble floor, bearing fruits of crystal and stars. Birds with rainbow feathers sang in harmony. Fountains flowed from the air itself, splashing into pools of gold and rose petals. The court gasped. Even the king stood in awe. "This," Jack said quietly, "is my second wonder." The king stepped down from his throne. He bowed his head to Jack. "You are no mere wanderer," he said. "You are a prince of marvels." So Jack was rewarded, not only with gold and honor, but with trust. He stayed in the palace, and became a great advisor, teaching the court to wonder, to imagine, to ask kindly, and treat spirits and people with care. As for the greedy servant, he was sent away with nothing but his empty pockets and his foolish pride. And the snuff box, Jack kept it safe, but he rarely used it again, only in moments of true need, and always with gratitude. Crescent moon, in the end, Jack found more than fortune. He found friendship, wisdom, and the knowledge that a kind heart is the greatest magic of all. And they say if you pass by the old palace today, you can still hear the faint song of spirits' laughter drifting through the air. The story of the three bears. Once upon a time, in the heart of a vast and whispering forest, there stood a little cottage. Not just any cottage, but a snug, sweet home tucked among tall trees, with ivy curling up its walls and wildflowers blooming along its cobblestone path. And who lived in this cozy forest home? Not people, but three bears. There was Great Big Bear, the tallest and strongest, with a deep voice and a heavy step. There was Middle-sized Bear, gentler and quieter, who liked things neat and tidy. And finally, there was Tiny Little Bear, with eyes full of wonder, a curious mind, and a voice soft like a whispering breeze. Each of them had their own favorite chair. Each had their own special bed. And, of course, each had their own porridge bowl. One sunny morning, with golden light dancing through the trees, the bears made a fresh pot of porridge for breakfast. But oh, the porridge was far too hot. Steam curled from the bowls like little clouds. So they decided to go for a gentle walk through the woods while the porridge cooled. Birds chirped softly, leaves rustled above, and the three bears wandered off down their winding woodland path, completely unaware that today would bring something quite unexpected. Now, not far from that quiet little house, through the trees and brambles, a little girl was walking. Her name was Goldilocks. She had golden curls that bounced with every step, and curious eyes that sparkled like morning dew. Goldilocks was wandering too far from home, she often did, but this time she wandered into something she wasn't quite prepared for. She skipped lightly through the ferns and dandelions, her basket swinging by her side, until at last she saw it. The cottage, nestled in the trees like a secret. Smoke no longer puffed from the chimney. The door was slightly ajar, and Goldilocks, well, she was just a little bit too curious. With one step, then two, then three, she tiptoed to the door. And without thinking twice, she gave a gentle push. Creak, the door swung open, and Goldilocks stepped inside the home of the three bears. Goldilocks stood still just inside the doorway, her eyes wide with wonder. The little cottage smelled of porridge, wood smoke, and something warm and comforting. "Hello?" she whispered. No answer. She tiptoed further in, the wooden floor creaking softly beneath her shoes. Right there in the cozy kitchen, on a wooden table, were three bowls of porridge. One was great big, one was middle-sized, and one was tiny and just right for a child. Goldilocks's tummy rumbled. She peeked at the big bowl first. The steam was still floating gently above it. She picked up the spoon and tasted it. "Ouch," she gasped. "That one's much too hot." She tried the middle-sized bowl next. "Oh dear," she said, "that one's too cold." Then she tried the tiniest bowl. She took a small spoonful, then another, and smiled. "Ah, this one's just right." And she ate it all up, every last bite. Now, feeling full and a little sleepy, she wandered into the sitting room. And there, in a half circle around the fireplace, were three chairs. A great big chair made of carved oak, a middle-sized chair with soft cushions, and a tiny chair with painted flowers on its legs. She tried the big one first. "Oh no," she said. "This is much too hard." She tried the middle-sized one. "This one's too soft," she mumbled, thinking like a marshmallow. Then she tried the smallest chair. "All just right," she sighed. But as she gave a happy little wiggle crack, the chair split beneath her. Then she tumbled the legs up, goes flying, and her cheeks turned rosy red with surprise. "Oh my," whispered Goldilocks, rubbing her knees and giggling just a little. "I suppose that one wasn't quite strong enough." She stood up, brushed herself off, and walked toward the stairs. The house was so quiet, and a little yawn escaped her lips. "I think I'll just rest a little," she murmured, climbing softly, slowly, up to the bedroom. At the top of the stairs, Goldilocks found a cozy little room, bathed in gentle morning light, with sunlight filtering through soft curtains. And in that room, there were 3 beds. One bed was great big, with a heavy wooden frame and a thick woolen blanket tucked just so. The second bed was middle-sized, with soft blue pillows and a neat little quilt. The third was tiny and delicate, with a lacy blanket and a pillow fluffed like a cloud. Goldilocks rubbed her eyes. She climbed onto the big bed. "Oh no," she whispered, "this bed is much too hard." She tossed, she turned, but couldn't get comfy. She tried the middle-sized bed next. "Oh dear," she said, "this one is too soft." She sank in deep and wriggled about. Then she tiptoed to the smallest bed. She sat down slowly, laid her head on the pillow, and let out a long sigh. "All just right," she whispered. And before she knew it, her eyes closed, her breathing slowed, and she drifted off into the deepest, sweetest sleep. Crescent sparkles, but just then down the forest trail 3 bears were returning home. Papa Bear tall and strong, Mama Bear gentle and wise, and Baby Bear bouncy and curious. They had gone for a walk to let their porridge cool. As they entered their little cottage, Papa Bear stopped. He sniffed the air. "Somebody's been in our house," he growled. They walked into the kitchen. Papa Bear looked at his bowl. "Somebody's been eating my porridge," he said, his voice low. Mama Bear looked at hers. "Somebody's been eating my porridge too," she said with surprise. And Baby Bear squealed, "Somebody's been eating my porridge and they've eaten it all up." Then they went into the sitting room. Papa Bear looked at his chair. "Somebody's been sitting in my chair," he rumbled. Mama Bear said, "And someone's been sitting in my chair too." But Baby Bear cried, "Somebody's been sitting in my chair and they've broken it all to bits." They climbed the stairs quietly, now one heavy paw step at a time. In the bedroom, Papa Bear saw his big bed. "Somebody's been lying in my bed." Mama Bear looked at her middle-sized bed. "And someone's been lying in my bed too." And Baby Bear ran to his tiny bed and squeaked, "Somebody's been lying in my bed, and she's still here." Goldilocks stirred. She blinked. 3 furry faces stared down at her, big eyes, brown fur, surprise expressions. Goldilocks gasped. She leapt out of bed like a startled deer, rushed down the stairs, and ran out the cottage door without even stopping to tie her shoe. She ran through the woods, past the stream, under the tall trees, and didn't stop until she reached home. And as for the 3 bears, they never saw her again, but they always made sure to lock their door before cooling their porridge ever after. Jack the Giant Killer once upon a time in the far-off land of Cornwall there lived a brave and clever young boy named Jack. He was the son of a poor farmer, but though he was born with little, Jack was rich in spirit, bold, kind-hearted, and quick-witted. He lived in a humble cottage with his mother, who loved him dearly. They worked hard to keep food on the table, but times were tough in those days. For, you see, the countryside lived in fear. Fear of a terrible giant who lived atop St. Michael's Mount. He was no ordinary giant, no. He was Cormoran, a monstrous creature, 12 feet tall and broad as 3 men. He would wade across to the mainland when the tide was low, steal cattle from the farmers, destroy homes, and carry off anything and anyone he pleased. Nothing seemed to stop him. The people were too afraid. But not Jack. Oh no. Jack's heart burned with courage. And one evening, as he listened to the cries of frightened neighbors, he stood up from his stool by the fire and said with a determined voice, "Mother, I've made up my mind. I'll rid this land of the giant. I may be but a boy, but I won't sit by while he ruins us." His mother gasped. "But Jack, he'll crush you like a twig." Jack smiled. "Not if I outwit him." So early the next morning, before the sun had stretched its arms across the hills, Jack packed a leather satchel with a horn, a pickaxe, and a sturdy rope. And with a kiss on his mother's cheek, he set off toward the mount. The journey was long, and mist curled around the moors like ghostly fingers. But Jack pressed on. At the foot of St. Michael's Mount, he began to dig. And dig. And dig. Hour after hour until he had made a deep, wide pit so deep, even a giant could not climb out. He lined it with sharp stakes and covered it with brushwood and dirt to make it look like solid ground. Then, as night fell, he sat beside it and blew his horn. Blam! The great sound echoed over the hills, and soon heavy footsteps thundered in the distance. Then, trees shook, stones rolled, and then, from the shadowy path, the giant appeared. His eyes glowed like lanterns. His teeth were yellow and jagged. "Who dares disturb my rest?" he roared. But Jack was calm. He stood on the far side of the trap and shouted, "It is I, Jack, and I say you've troubled these lands long enough." With a howl of rage, the giant charged, and with one tremendous step thud, he fell straight into the hidden pit. Cut. Down he tumbled, impaled upon the wooden stakes below. Jack peered in from above and called out, "That's the end of your terror, come on." The next morning, the people came running to see, and when they found the pit and the lifeless giant within, they cheered so loud that the birds rose from the trees in delight. They called Jack a hero, a giant killer, and from that day on, he became famous across all of Cornwall. But this was only the beginning, because far to the north, other giants stirred in their sleep rumors of a bold boy from the south who dared challenge their kind. And one of them, a cruel and tricksy brute named Blunderbore, swore that Jack of Cornwall would be his next meal. After defeating the terrible Cormoran, Jack's fame spread far and wide from Cornwall's green cliffs to the foggy moors of the north. Folk whispered his name like a spark of hope. But where there is light, there are always shadows. One of those shadows was Blunderbore, a cruel and wicked giant who lived deep in the dark hills of Wales. He had heard of Cormoran's fall, and when Jack's name reached his ears, Blunderbore's eyes burned with fury. "This boy shall pay," he growled. "I'll catch him and grind his bones to bread." Unaware of the danger waiting ahead, Jack was traveling through Wales on a new adventure. He carried with him only a sword, a few coins, and his clever mind. As the day grew hot, he rested beneath an old oak tree and drifted into a light sleep. But suddenly, crash! A net of woven iron dropped from the sky, and before Jack could move a snatch, he was scooped up and carried away by Blunderbore himself. The ground shook under the giant's steps as he roared with laughter. "I have you now, Jack of Cornwall." Through dark forests and across craggy peaks, Blunderbore carried Jack to his towering castle, hidden deep in the hills. There, he locked Jack in a great stone room high above the earth. The walls were cold. Chains hung from hooks. Bones littered the floor. And Jack, brave as he was, shivered just a little. That night the giant returned. And not alone. Another giant entered his brother, Rebek. He was even taller, with a beard like knotted ropes and a hammer the size of a cart. "Tomorrow," said Blunderbore, "we feast on this bold little slayer." Jack, however, stayed calm. He looked around the room and noticed something, an old rusted sword in the corner, and beside it 2 long ropes of silk. He waited. When the giants left to sleep, Jack tiptoed to the sword, tested its edge, and smiled to himself. "They may be strong," he whispered, "but they're not clever." As dawn neared, Jack sprang into action. He tied the silk ropes into loops to strung nooses. Then, sword in hand, he crept quietly down the stairs to the giant's room. They were snoring like thunder. One step at a time, Jack tiptoed between them. And whoop! He flung the noose over Blunderbore's head. Snap! He pulled it tight over Rebek's. The giant woke with a roar, but too late. With all his might, Jack swung the sword with whack, and in 2 strikes he brought them both crashing down. The castle went quiet. Jack caught his breath, and then he heard something. Crying. He followed the sound down a winding stair into a dungeon. There, locked in cells, were dozens of prisoners, knights, ladies, merchants, even children. All of them had been taken by the giants over many years. "Are you real?" one whispered. "Yes," Jack said with a grin. "And I think it's time you all went home." He smashed the locks, freed them one by one, and led them out into the morning light. The people were overjoyed. They kissed his hands, blessed his name, and declared him a hero once again. But Jack, humble as ever, just tipped his cap and said, "There's always more work to do." After saving the prisoners and slaying the twin giants, Jack wandered across the land once more, with his sword by his side and stories whispering in his wake. But one afternoon, as golden sunlight spilled over a wildflower field, Jack heard the faint toll of a bell with no church, no tower, no sound but in the air itself. Drawn by the sound, he followed it into a deep green wood. There, hidden behind a veil of mist, stood a castle taller and grander than any he had seen. Its towers twisted toward the sky, its walls shimmered like moonstone, and a strange silence rutted all. Jack stepped closer and the gates opened on their own. Inside, the halls were empty. Candle flames floated in midair. There were no servants, no voices, no footsteps. But there was a throne, and in that throne sat a figure, not man, not beast. It was the sorcerer giant Galligantus, the dark magician who could bend wind, time, and shadow. He was 10 feet tall, draped in silver robes, with eyes like storm clouds and a voice that rumbled like thunder under earth. "Jack of Cornwall," he said, "you have slain giants and freed captives, but here, in my castle, your courage shall end." But Jack didn't flinch. "You speak of fear," he said, "but I bring justice." The sorcerer laughed. "Then face my champion." He raised his staff, and from a swirl of smoke rose the most terrifying figure Jack had ever seen, a giant completely invisible. Only the thunder of its steps, the crash of its fists, and the wind from its breath gave it form. Jack drew his sword, but how could he fight what he could not see? He ducked as a mighty blow crashed beside him, splintering the marble floor. He rolled, leapt, swam wildly, but missed each time. Then he remembered a trick. From his coat, Jack pulled a patch of flour gifted by a kind farmer long ago. For when the way's unclear, the farmer had said. Jack tossed the flour high into the air and like star. Henny Penny once upon a time, in a cozy little farmyard nestled among rolling hills and gentle fields, there lived a sweet little hen named Henny Penny. Henny Penny was a gentle soul, with soft feathers the color of caramel and eyes bright as polished buttons. She loved nothing more than to wander quietly beneath the apple trees, pecking at grains, and enjoying the sunshine that warmed her feathers. One sunny day, as Henny Penny was busily scratching around near the big oak tree in the heart of the farmyard, something quite unexpected happened. As she pecked and hummed softly to herself, an acorn fell from high above straight down and gently thumped right onto her head. "Oh!" cried Henny Penny, jumping with surprise. She looked up into the branches, but she saw nothing, only leaves swaying gently in the breeze. Her little heart fluttered with worry. "The sky," she gasped. "Oh dear, the sky must be falling." Quick as her tiny feet could carry her, Henny Penny rushed across the farmyard, past the blooming flowers, round the vegetable patch, and straight down the lane. "I must tell the king," she thought, her voice shaking with urgency. She hadn't gone far before she met her dear friend, Cocky Locky, with his shiny feathers and cheerful crow. "Oh, Cocky Locky," she calls, breathless. "The sky is falling, an enormous piece of sky hit my head, and I must warn the king at once." Cocky Locky flapped his wings in surprise. "Oh my, then we must hurry," he said, joining her at once. Together, they raced down the lane, two frightened little birds, their shadows stretching long behind them, their hearts beating quickly, carrying news that would surely shake the kingdom to its very foundations. But little did they know just who they would meet next and where their frightened journey would lead them. Henny Penny and Cocky Locky hurried down the winding lane, beneath the rustling trees and past sunny fields, their little feet padding swiftly on the soft earth. Soon, they came upon their dear friend, Ducky Lucky, who was happily splashing in a cool, sparkling pond. "Oh, Ducky Lucky," cried Henny Penny, her feathers fluttering with worry. "The sky is falling. It hit me right on the head, and we must hurry to warn the king." Ducky Lucky's eyes grew round as river stones. Oh dear," she quacked, shaking water from her feathers. "I'll come too." And now three worried little friends hurried onward, along winding paths and over gentle hills, sharing whispers of worry as they went. Soon, they spotted their cheerful companion, Goosey Lucy, resting peacefully beside a patch of sweet grass. "Goosey Lucy," called Cocky Locky, his voice trembling, "the sky is falling. We must go quickly to tell the king." Goosey Lucy stretched her graceful neck and honked softly. "Oh my feathers, I shall join you at once." And so four frightened friends continued their journey, each step carrying them closer to the royal palace, their little hearts beating with determination. Finally, on the edge of a fragrant meadow, they met another friend, Turkey Lurkey, with feathers of deep bronze and eyes full of curiosity. "Turkey Lurkey," cried Ducky Lucky, flapping her wings urgently, "the sky is falling, it's true. We must warn the king immediately." Turkey Lurkey puffed himself up importantly. "Well then," he gobbled loudly, "we haven't a moment to lose." Now 5 little friends travelled onward together, Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, Ducky Lucky, Goosey Lucy, and Turkey Lucky, moving quickly along the path, all intent on their important mission. But as they rounded a bend, past tall whispering grasses, they saw a shadow step softly from the woods ahead. It was Foxy Loxy, the cleverest, slyest fox in all the countryside, his eyes shining brightly, and a gentle, friendly smile curving at the corners of his mouth. "Good afternoon, dear friends," Foxy Loxy purred softly. "Where are you hurrying to on such a lovely day?" Henny Penny took a breath, ready to speak, unaware that the fox's gentle eyes held a clever secret and that the next words they shout might change their journey forever. Foxy Loxy smiled gently, his eyes glittering softly in the afternoon sun. "Oh dear, dear friends," he said sweetly, "you seem quite troubled. Where are you going in such a rush?" Henny Penny stepped forward, her voice quivering slightly. "Oh, Foxy Loxy, we are rushing to tell the king the sky is falling. It landed right on my head." Foxy Loxy tilted his head slowly. His tail swished thoughtfully behind him. "Ah," he purred, "then you must hurry, indeed. But my dear little birds, I know a faster way to reach the king." "Really?" said Cocky Locky, hopeful and curious. "Yes," said Foxy Loxy gently, "right this way through the woods. I'll lead you." Henny Penny hesitated, her tiny heart fluttering uncertainly. But her friends, so eager and trusting, began following Foxy Loxy along a shady woodland path. Under the trees, the light grew dimmer, the air cooler, and soon they reached a dark, mysterious cave hidden by ferns and hanging vines. "Just inside here," Foxy Loxy said smoothly, "is a shortcut. Come quickly, dear friends." But as Foxy Loxy stepped closer to the cave, Henny Penny felt a gentle whisper in her heart, a tiny voice that warned her softly. "Wait," she called suddenly, her little voice clear and strong. Her friends paused, surprised. "What if we're wrong?" she asked quietly. "What if the sky isn't falling after all?" The friends exchanged worried glances, remembering the gentle woods, the peaceful fields. Henny Penny took a careful breath. "What if I was mistaken?" she asked, looking bravely at her friends. Foxy Loxy narrowed his eyes, but said nothing. Then, from above, another acorn fell softly, bumping gently onto the ground right beside them. The friends all looked up and saw the mighty oak, its branches full of acorns, its leaves whispering quietly. "Oh," whispered Henny Penny softly. "It was just an acorn after all." Foxy Loxy's gentle expression faded, and seeing his chance slip away, he slunk silently back into the shadows. Relieved and a little wiser, the friends turned from the cave and slowly began their journey back home. They laughed gently at their mistake, feeling lighter and calmer, knowing they had avoided trouble by trusting the quiet voice within. And as the evening sun dipped low, painting the sky in warm gold and pink, Henny Penny walked beside her friends, grateful for their safety and the peace that comes when fear fades away. They returned home to the quiet farmyard beneath the familiar oak tree, safe and sound, and a little bit wiser than before. And that night, as they settled into their cozy nests, Henny Penny smiled softly and whispered to herself, "The sky above is calm and bright, and all is safe and sound tonight." Child of Roland, long ago, in a peaceful kingdom tucked away beyond the misty hills, there stood a castle made of ancient stones, wrapped in ivy and softened by the passing of time. In this castle lived a kind and gentle king, along with his 3 brave sons and his beloved daughter, the sweet and lovely Princess Ellen. Now, Princess Ellen was joyful and curious, with eyes as clear as summer skies and hair that flowed like golden sunlight. But one bright day, as she played beneath the old stone arches of the castle garden, something strange happened. She stepped carefully around a bed of roses, following a butterfly with wings the color of twilight, purple, soft blue, and shimmering silver, when suddenly she disappeared without a sound. Her brothers searched everywhere, calling her name gently, then louder, until their voices echoed back unanswered. At last, heartbroken, they came to Merlin, the wise wizard of the kingdom. Merlin listened closely, then spoke slowly with eyes full of shadow and light. "Your sister," he said softly, "has wandered into the land of Elfland, a kingdom enchanted and hidden from our world. How can we bring her home?" asked the eldest brother urgently. Merlin looked grave, his voice barely a whisper. "To rescue her, you must journey to the Dark Tower in the heart of Elfland itself. But heed me closely, eat no food there, drink no water, and above all, never turn back once your journey has begun." The eldest brother went first, brave and strong. But days passed, and he did not return. Then the second brother journeyed into Elfland. Yet he too disappeared without a trace. At last, only the youngest child, Roland, remained. He stood tall, though still so young, with eyes full of gentle determination. "I will bring them home," he whispered. "For my sister and brothers, I will face whatever waits." And so Child Roland stepped beyond the edge of the known world into the swirling mist, and began his journey to the enchanted kingdom of Elfland. He held tightly to his courage, his heart softly beating with hope, unaware of the magical wonders, terrible trials, and strange adventures that lay ahead. Child Roland stepped forward, leaving behind the familiar world past rolling hills, whispering trees, and fields painted gold by the fading sun. He traveled until twilight fell around him in deep, velvet shadows. Soon, mist rose from the earth, curling softly about his feet, guiding him toward the invisible border that marked the entrance to the land of magic Elfland. As Roland stepped through, the air shimmered gently, as if he had passed through a curtain of silk. Now, he found himself standing in a place unlike any he'd ever known. Flowers glowed softly with colors never seen: violet and emerald, gold and sapphire. Trees whispered words of welcome, their leaves like silver lace. But Child Roland remembered Merlin's careful words: eat nothing, drink nothing, and never turn back. He walked bravely onward, the path beneath his feet sparkling softly in the strange moonlight. At last, he saw in the distance the shadowy shape of a dark tower, the dark tower Merlin had spoken of, rising silently against a sky filled with unfamiliar stars. But before he could reach the tower, a voice sweet as music called from the shadows. "Oh, weary traveler," it sang softly, "rest a while and taste the fruits of Elfland." Roland paused, tempted by the soft voice. He turned slightly, and there, standing in a clearing of gentle starlight, stood a beautiful elf maiden, offering golden fruit and a silver goblet of sparkling water. But just as Roland reached out his hand, he heard Merlin's voice in his memory, clear and strong. "Eat no food, drink no water." He withdrew his hand gently and shook his head. "I must not, fair maiden," he said politely. "My journey is important." The elf maiden smiled gently, but her eyes grew darker. "Then at least rest a moment," she whispered, "and listen to my song." Her voice was sweet and soothing, and Roland's eyelids began to feel heavy, dreams drifting softly into his mind. Yet again, Merlin's warning echoed within him, who never turned aside. With a deep breath, he straightened, took a determined step forward, and continued toward the dark tower. As he moved away, the elf maiden faded like mist, and the path became clearer before him. At last, he stood before the tower, its door heavy and carved with symbols he did not know. Taking a deep breath, Childer Roland lifted his hand and pushed open the door, stepping bravely into the darkness inside. What awaited him he could not guess, but his heart beat steady, filled with courage, hope, and a quiet belief that he would find his beloved sister and brothers and bring them safely home. Childer Roland stepped bravely through the door, his heart softly beating with courage. Inside, the tower was quiet, so still that he could hear the softest whisper of his own breath. In the shadows, faint candles flickered, casting gentle golden glow upon ancient tapestries that lined the walls. The air felt heavy with enchantment, and Roland knew he must tread carefully. As he moved through the halls, he noticed statues of knights and maidens strangely lifelike, frozen mid-step, mid-gesture. A shiver passed gently through him, but he pressed onward, his mind fixed upon his beloved sister and brothers. Soon, at the end of a long corridor, he found a great hall, and there, on a throne carved from crystal and silver, sat his sister, the sweet Princess Ellen, with eyes downcast and hands folded as if in enchanted sleep. "Oh, Ellen," Roland whispered softly, stepping carefully toward her. But as he approached, a shadow rose from behind the throne. It was the King of Elfland, tall and stern, with eyes dark as midnight. "Who dares enter my tower?" he asked gently, yet dangerously. Childer Roland stood tall, his voice calm and brave. "It is I, Roland, brother of the princess, here to free her and my brothers." The Elf King smiled slowly, a soft yet menacing curve of his lips. "To free them," he whispered, "you must defeat me or remain here forever." And with that, the Elf King drew a sword that glowed softly in the shadowy light. Roland drew his own bladed gift from Ellen himself, and the two faced each other in a silent, steady challenge. They circled, blades crossing gently, their footsteps barely making a sound. With a whisper of steel and a flash of moonlight, Roland and the Elf King clashed, swift yet graceful, like dancers in a dream. Their swords rang gently in the enchanted silence until, at last, with courage and skill, Roland touched the Elf King's chest lightly with the tip of his sword. The Elf King sighed softly, his sword falling gently to the floor. "You have won, Childer Roland," he said, "and the enchantment is undone." Suddenly, the statues began to stir, and Roland's brothers stepped forward, blinking gently as if waking from a long and restful sleep. Princess Ellen rose from her throne, her eyes filled with tears of joy. "Oh, Roland," she whispered, "you have brought us safely home." Together, they stepped from the dark tower, out into the soft dawn of Elfland, where gentle sunlight sparkled like gold upon the enchanted flowers. With Merlin's wisdom guiding their hearts, they journeyed safely back to their kingdom beyond the misty hills. The people rejoiced, and the good king embraced his children, his heart full of gratitude. And from that day onward, Childer Roland's story was whispered in gentle tones, told by candlelight, a quiet reminder that courage, love, and a gentle heart can overcome even the strongest magic. And as sleep gently calls you now, remember that brave hearts always find their way home, guided by hope, through shadows, and safely into dreams. Molly Whoppy, the stars twinkle softly outside the giant window, casting a gentle glow across the quiet room. Molly Whoppy lay awake, listening carefully to the slow, heavy breathing of the giant and his wife, waiting patiently until she was sure they slept soundly. With silent feet, Molly gently rose from the bed and moved through the shadows toward the giant's daughters. Each of the giant's daughters wore a golden chain around her neck, a treasure, yes, but also a clever mocker. Very carefully, Molly slipped each golden chain off and placed them gently around the necks of her own sleeping sisters. Then, stepping softly once again, she returned to bed and lay very still, her heart beating calmly with courage. Late in the night, the giant awoke, grumbling deeply. In the dark, he reached for the golden chains, feeling for the ones without them. "There they are," he growled softly, and he picked up what he thought were the 3 visitors from their beds. But because Molly had cleverly switched the necklaces, he carried away his own daughters instead of Molly and her sisters. When the giant had gone, Molly awoke her sisters gently. "It's time to leave," she whispered. "We must hurry." Quietly, bravely, they slipped from the cottage into the cool night air, following a path lit softly by moonlight, until they reached a wide river that flowed gently under starlit skies. Standing by the riverbank, Molly breathed deeply, knowing their escape was successful, but sensing this was just the start of a greater adventure. She held tightly to her sister's hands, her heart full of quiet strength, her clever mind already thinking of what lay beyond this enchanted night. Molly Whoppy stood quietly by the gentle river, moonlight, dancing softly on the water's surface, holding tightly to her sister's hands, knowing the danger was not yet past. "Quickly now," she whispered, guiding her sisters gently across the narrow stone bridge that crossed the river beneath the stars. Just as they reached the far side, they heard a deep roar from the distance. The giant had discovered the clever trick and was coming after them, his footsteps shaking the earth. "Hurry," urged Molly, her voice calm and steady, leading her sisters to safety beneath thick branches of an old oak tree. The giant approached the bridge, his eyes fierce with anger. But the bridge was too narrow, and the stones too slippery in the starlight, and he stumbled, tumbling gently into the river, where the cool waters carried him away far from his sisters and into the peaceful night. Safe once more, Molly and her sisters continued their journey until at last they came to a grand castle, lit softly by lanterns and candles, where the king lived a kind man, his heart gentle and wise. Hearing of Molly's bravery, the king offered a challenge: "Bring me the giant's sword, Molly Whoppy, and you shall earn a safe home and fortune for your sisters and yourself." Molly, brave as ever, accepted. She journeyed back through fields and woods, returning quietly to the giant's home. As the giant slept, Molly tiptoed carefully inside, lifting the heavy sword with steady hands. Quiet as moonbeams, she carried it back to the king's castle. Delighted, the king smiled warmly. "Brave Molly Whoppy," he said softly, "you have proven yourself clever and courageous." And so, Molly and her sisters lived safely and happily with their new friends in the castle, their days peaceful, their nights restful and calm. And Molly Whoppy, the clever, brave little girl, never forgot the gentle power of courage, kindness, and hope. The golden ARM in a far-off kingdom washed by silver rivers and crowned with misty hills, there lived a gentle queen and her newborn daughter, the Princess Orlair. From the moment she was born, Orlair's right arm gleamed like spun gold, a wonder none had ever seen. It was said her golden arm brought life to the palace gardens, making roses bloom in winter and fountains sparkle even in moonless nights. Yet envy sometimes hides in the hearts of those we trust. The queen's sister, Lady Isolde, coveted that golden arm and its power. Quietly, on a midnight when the palace slept, she slipped into the infant's chamber and vanished with the princess, spirits of her magic flaring like a lost star. When the queen awoke, the cradle stood empty, and in its place lay a single golden glove, the hollow echo of her daughter's magic. With tears that glittered like dewdrops, she sent word throughout the land, "Find my child before the magic fades." Brave knights and cunning wizards answered the call, yet none returned, with Aurelia safe at their side. Seasons turned, the palace garden wilted, and the queen's sorrow grew as heavy as winter's frost. Then, on the dawn of rose and amber, the young page Roran stepped forward. He was small, but his heart was vast, and he carried in his breast a quiet hope to rescue the lost princess and return the golden arm to bloom once more. Rowan knelt before the queen. "Place me in your service," he whispered. "For I will cross rivers, climb mountains, and outwit any who would hide her." The queen, her eyes weary yet bright with gratitude, gave Rowan a single clue, a folded scrap of cloth embroidered with a lone golden flower, the emblem of Lady Isolde's castle, high upon the crag of Whispers. So Rowan set out at first light, his cloak brushing dewy grass, his hope shining like a new sunrise, unaware of the trials, the enchantments, and the perilous riddles that awaited him on the road to the crag of Whispers. Rowan's journey led him through emerald forests and over sun-baked plains, guided always by the single golden bloom embroidered on the cloth. At last, after many days and nights, he reached the foot of the crag of Whispers, a sheer cliff rising like a silent sentinel against the sky. Legend said the wind that circled its peak carried every secret told below. Even the stones, it was believed, could speak if you listened closely. As Rowan began to climb, the wind rose to greet him, first a breath, then a sigh, then a chorus of whispered voices. Turn back, no one passes here, the golden arm is lost." Steadying his heart, Rowan pressed on. He wrapped the cloth, the only proof of Lady Isolde's guilt, around his fist, and climbed handhold by handhold until at dusk he found a narrow ledge where the wind died, and only his own breath remained. There, half hidden behind a curtain of ivy, stood the gates of Lady Isolde's castle, ancient oaks carved with twisting vines, their doors sealed by two massive locks, each shaped like a sleeping dragon. Beside them grew a single golden rose, its petals radiant even in fading light, the same flower that braved Rowan's tale. Rowan kneeled before it and gently pressed the cloth against the rose's stem. Softly, he spoke the words the queen had taught him. "By sorrow's tears and hope's last gleam, I claim the right to what was stolen. Open now, guardian blooms, the path beyond these walls." The rose trembled, its petals unfurling to reveal a tiny golden key nestled at its heart. With awe, Rowan plucked the key and approached the dragon locks. The first lock clicked open at the smallest touch, the second at the gentlest turn. As the gate swung inward, the wind returned only now. Its whispers carried wonder. "Welcome, welcome, the golden arm awaits." The torches flared to life along the castle walls, casting long shadows that danced like silent courtiers. Rowan stepped inside a courtyard of moonlit marble, where fountains leaped like silver flames and statues of hounds and griffins stood watchful guard. In the center, before a great hall of black stone, lay a carved chestband with enchanted iron. Rowan's heart leapt. He knew this must hold the princess. But as he reached for the latch, a voice as smooth as silk echoed behind him. "Brave page, you have passed the trials of iron and ivy, but will you pass the trial of tears?" Rowan turned. There stood Lady Isolde herself, elegant as moonlight, cruel as thorns, her pale eyes gleaming beneath a crown of black roses. "My little princess has grown away from me," the queen's sister whispered, "and only a heart unguarded by grief can set her free." She raised a slender hand, and dark magic crackled at her fingertips. Rowan's courage fluttered like a startled bird, but he remembered the queen's love and the princess's golden arm, and he lifted his chin to face Lady Isolde's challenge. Lady Isolde's cloak of midnight swirled around her as she raised her hand, and from her palm a single, shimmering tear hung, the distilled grief of a mother's stolen joy. "Pour out your sorrow, young page," she intoned, "and only then may the princess awaken." Rowan felt the weight of the moment. He thought of the queen's silent tears, of a father's aching hope, and of the golden arm that once brought life to every garden bloom. Gathering his courage, he reached within his tunic and drew forth the golden glove, the only remnant of magic he carried. With gentle fingers, he removed it, revealing its hollow, waiting form. He closed his eyes and let his heart fill with every sorrow felt. The queen's sleepless nights, the courtier's whispered fears, and the lonely echo of a princess lost. And then, in one steady breath, he opened his palm and let those sorrows flow not as bitterness, but as compassion, pure and true. From his hand sprang a drop of glowing light, warm as sunrise, which fell upon the enchanted chest. With a soft click, the iron bonds unwound, and the lid creaked open. Inside lay Princess Aurelia, her golden arm once more gleaming in moonlit radiance. Her eyelids fluttered, and she awoke with a soft sigh as if awakening from the sweetest dream. The moment her eyes met Rowan's, the tear in Lady Isol's hand glowed bright, then vanished, freeing the queen's sister from envy's shadow. Isol knelt, her own tears of remorse cleansing her heart. "I stole what was not mine," she whispered, "and in your kindness I am redeemed." Rowan helped Aurelia to her feet, and together they stepped into the courtyard's silver glow. The moonlit fountains danced once more, and the statues seemed to stand a little taller in approval. Aurelia raised her right arm, no longer hidden, and touched the ancient rose carving above the gate. Petals of gold unfurled along the castle walls, and life returned to every withered blossom in the garden. With joy restored, Rowan led the princess back down the winding path, through the open gates of Lady Isol's castle, and across the crag of whispers now silent in peace. When they returned to the royal palace, the queen's tears turned to laughter, and the king's heart soared as he embraced his daughter. Rowan was hailed a hero of true compassion and courage, and from that day forward, the kingdom bloomed in everlasting spring. And every dawn thereafter, Princess Aurelia's golden arm glowed softly in the light, a reminder that even the deepest magic cannot rival the power of a kind and sorrowful heart. The history of Tom Thumb in a quiet countryside. Long before the clamor of machines and the rush of cities, there lived a humble woodcutter and his wife, whose only wish was for a child. They prayed by candlelight and whispered to the stars until, one radiant spring morning, their prayers were answered. A tiny son was born no larger than a thumb. They named him Tom Thumb, marveling at his delicate fingers and bright, curious eyes. Though small in stature, Tom's heart was vast. He laughed at daisies and chased the morning dew, riding atop a ladybug shell and peering through the blades of grass as if the world were a grand mountain range. Each dawn, he sat upon his mother's shoulder, listening wide-eyed to the songs of larks and the gentle rustle of the woodcutter's axe. Though many feared for his safety, his parents sheltered him with loving kindness, crafting for him a tiny cradle of walnut shell and sewing him clothes from moth-caught silk. Before long, morsels of bread seemed mountains to Tom, and grains of sugar sparkled like buried treasure. He learned the forest secrets from the chirping chickadee and the cunning foxcub, and he made friends with every creature that would pause to hear his cheerful chatter. Yet as Tom grew bolder, curiosity tugged at his heart. One golden afternoon, he rode a beetle beyond the garden gate, where the world opened into rolling fields and winding lanes. He waved goodbye to home, the walnut shell cradle etched forever in his memory, and set off on an adventure suited only to a boy of his unique size. No chimney too narrow, no locked chest too small, Tom Thumb discovered his courage matched his tiny frame. He tumbled through village squares, dodged the leather boots of startled farmers, and outwitted every challenge with quick wit and kind words. As dusk fell, Tom reached the tavern by the old mill, its door swinging wide to welcome thirsty travelers. Inside, a kindly innkeeper found him cold in a spoon and lifted him gently to a gleaming counter. There, Tom told tales of his journeys of spiders turned steeds and acorns as castles, and all who listened felt their own spirits lift with wonder. That night, Tom Thumb stayed beneath the tavern rafters, cradled in a folded napkin, dreaming of the adventures yet to come. For though he was small, he carried within him a heart as grand as any knight or king, and his story was only just beginning. At the break of dawn, Tom Thumb woke to the gentle clinking of armor. He peered from his fold of linen and discovered he was no longer in the tavern, but rather perched atop a broadsword's hilt in the grand hall of the king's palace. The royal guard, tall and stern, had found Tom amid a stack of coins, his bright laughter echoing through the silent chamber. Mistaking him for a courtly jester's trick, they presented him to the king, hoping to please the liege with the novelty. King Leopold, a kindly ruler with a flowing beard of silver, leaned forward from his golden throne, eyes twinkling in curiosity. "Tell me, little one," he boomed, "what can a boy no larger than my finger do in my kingdom?" Tom folded his tiny arms, voice steady though barely above a whisper. "Your Majesty," he began, "I have ridden beetles across fields, dined with fox cubs in moonlit glades, and escaped the boots of furious farmers all by mind and heart, not by might. If you grant me but a chance, I will serve your court with wit and loyalty." The courtiers gasped, but the king's laughter rang out warm. "Very well, Tom Thumb," he declared, "you shall be our royal messenger, for swift as the wind you'll travel, and clever as any court advisor you shall prove." Thus Tom was entrusted with a folded parchment sealed in wax, the king's most urgent decree for distant lords. They laid him gently atop a majestic falcon's back, its feathers ruffling like silk in the breeze. With a screech, the falcon soared skyward, and Tom clung fast, laughter dancing in his heart. Below, the palace faded into a patchwork of jewel-green fields. Tom watched as rivers wound like silver ribbons, villages scattered like seeds, and mountains rose like silent guardians. Within the hour, the falcon set him down before the gates of Lord Ireland's castle, and Tom leapt lightly to the drawbridge. Inside the grand courtyard, he delivered the parchment with a curtsy so precise that the gods used, the giants and nobles marveled at his poise. Lord Ireland himself opened the seal, and upon reading, the lord's brow smoothed, for the message brought peace to a brewing feud. Impressed beyond measure, Lord Ireland presented Tom with a curious gift of a tiny golden ring etched with a map of the kingdom's roads. "Use this well," Ireland said, "and may it guide you when sight fails." Tom thanked him and mounted the falcon once more, ring snug upon his thumb. He returned to the palace under a canopy of clouds, where King Leopold awaited beside burning braziers. "You have done well," the king proclaimed, accepting Tom with a clap so gentle it still shook the wooden floor. "Your courage and wit have saved both messenger and realm." But Tom's adventures were far from over. That very night, whispers reached the court of a fearsome giant tipping carts upon the northern road, stranding travelers in the dark. Remembering his own small size and clever escapes, Tom rose, determination glowing in his heart. "Your Majesty," he said, "I will go," and with the golden ring and falcon's aid, he prepared once more to journey into danger, to bring aid where might alone would falter. As dawn painted the sky pink and gold, Tom Thumb nudged the falcon's wing, and together they set out, for even the smallest hero must answer the call when courage beckons beyond the palace walls. Before the first light had brushed the sky, Tom Thumb and his faithful falcon set forth along the winding northern road, where travelers spoke in hushed tones of a mighty giant who lay in wait, 1 foot on the path, 1 foot in the ditch, toppling carts with thunderous might. As dawn's pink glow teased the horizon, Tom spied a merchant's overturned wagon, hay strewn like golden snow, and frightened horses stamping in unrest. Behind them stood the giant, a towering figure with boots as large as cottages, grasping a gnarled club made from an ancient oak branch. With a chirp, the falcon landed at Tom's side, its keen eyes locking on the giant's shadow. Tom clambered onto a fallen wheel, the golden ring warm upon his thumb, and called up in his clear, confident voice, "Good giant, halt your wrath. Do you not see these weary travelers need aid, not terror?" The giant bellowed so loud it shook the leaves. "Little man, you dare command me? I break carts for sport, my strength is unmatched." Tom steadied himself, remembering every enchantment, every forest lesson, every crystal sword whisper, and spoke gently yet firmly. "I may be small, but kindness is stronger than fear. Help me set these carts right, and I will share a secret to soothe your heart." The giant paused, curiosity cracking his fury. He knelt, careful not to crush the overturned coach, and together he and Tom lifted wagons back on their wheels. Travelers gasped, then murmured thank yous as horses nuzzled Tom's pocket for a friendly crumb. Once the carts were mended, the giant turned, massive hands resting on his club. "Now," Tom whispered, "place your hand upon this ring." The giant did so, and the enchanted map glowed softly against his palm, revealing roads of friendship, bridges of trust, and villages eager to welcome him. Awed by the ring's gentle magic, the giant's shoulders slumped and his roar softened into a rumble of regret. "I have been cruel," he admitted, tears in his great eyes. "I shall use my strength to help travelers, not to hinder them." Together, they escorted the wagons down the road, the giant's footsteps now steady and kind, Tom perched on his shoulder like a triumphant banner. When at last they reached the palace gates, King Leopold himself greeted them, astonished at the sight of the reformed giant and the tiny hero upon his broad shoulder. With joyous laughter, the court celebrated, and the giant, no longer a terror, was granted stewardship of the northern road, where he guided wagons safely on their way. Tom Thumb, though small as ever, stood tall before the king. "Your Majesty," he said, "we have turned fear into friendship and strength into service." The king smiled, placing a gentle hand upon Tom's head. "Truly, Tom Thumb, your courage and compassion have made this kingdom greater than any sword. From this day forth, let it be known that the smallest heart can wield the greatest power." And so Tom returned to the palace in triumph, the falcon circling above like a proud herald, his golden ring ever glowing with the promise that kindness, wit, and the generous spirit are the truest magic of all. Mr. FOX, in a quiet village nestled between rolling fields and whispering woods, there lived a kindly farmer and his young daughter, Clara. The little farmhouse stood at the edge of the forest, where dawn's first light danced on the dew-kissed grass. Each morning, Clara helped her father tend the hens, collecting fresh eggs and gathering sweet clover for their small flock. One misty dawn, as she followed a red hen into the shadowed tree line, she glimpsed a flash of rosette fur between the trees, a pair of bright, curious eyes watching her. Heart fluttering with a mix of wonder and caution, Clara called softly, "Hello there, who are you?" From behind a mossy oak stepped a tall, upright fox, dressed in a rough-spun coat and bang with polite grace. "Good morning, fair maiden," he said, his voice smooth as the forest breeze. "I am Mr. Fox. I mean you no harm. I travel these woods offering assistance to those in need of a clever friend." Clara's surprise melted into curiosity. "My father could use help with the farm chores. The winter snows were harsh, and our firewood runs low." Mr. Fox nodded thoughtfully. "If you will trust me, bring your father here tomorrow, and I shall show you a path to woodlands rich with fallen timber and more besides." With that, he tipped his coat's tail and vanished into the silver morning mist, leaving Clara clutching a single rosette leaf in a flutter of excited wonder in her heart. The next day, Clara led her father through the waking fields, their boots leaving soft print on the dew-wet earth. At the forest edge, they found Mr. Fox waiting, leaning against a sapling as though he earned every tree around. "Follow me," he said with a warm smile, and Clara and her father ventured deeper into ferns that brushed their knees and moss that cushioned their steps. Soon they came upon a grove hidden from any well-worn path, ancient oaks and beeches whose trunks were thick as cottages, their branches interlaced in a leafy cathedral. In the center lay fallen logs, stripped of bark by season's work, and piles of wood perfect for hearth and stove. "This grove has long been my secret," Mr. Fox explained, his eyes glinting like amber. "Here, the wind never stirs the ground, and no man's axe has touched its timber in many years. Take what you need and ask only kindness in return." Overjoyed, the farmer set to gathering wood, and Clara watched in awe as Mr. Fox pointed at the logs easiest to split, the branches best for kindling. By midday, their cart was piled high. As they turned to thank him, Mr. Fox's expression grew solemn. "My gift comes at no cost in coin," he said, "but remember this, the forest gives freely, only to those who protect its quiet magic." With a gentle warning, he slipped away through the trees, leaving Clara and her father to wonder at the secret friendship. Winter's chill deepened, and the farmer's hearth blazed warmly with the wood from the hidden grove. Clara and her father never forgot Mr. Fox's kindness nor his caution to honor the forest's magic. When spring dawned in a riot of green, the farmer discovered his youngest calf tangled in brambles at the edge of a new logging path. He rushed to its aid, but the thorns bit deep. As the father worked to untangle the frightened calf, a rustle sounded nearby, and there, stepping through the ferns, stood Mr. Fox once more. Gently, he circled the calf, inspecting the wounds with wise, soft eyes, and with a nod, vanished again. The very next morning, Clara found fresh herb bundles laid at the farm gate, wild comfrey, yarrow, and soothing plantain all gathered from the hidden grove. She brewed a healing poultice, and by nightfall, the calf lay safe in its stall, the bites already easing. Clara knew then that Mr. Fox watched over them, still the guardian of both forest and farm, rewarding care with kindness, and reminding them always that true friendship blooms when we honor the world's quiet magic. Lazy Jack, in a humble cottage beside a winding country lane, there lived a boy named Jack, though few could call him lazy without a sigh. Jack's mother rose with dawn's first light, tending the hens, stirring porridge, and sweeping the hearth. Jack, however, preferred the sun's high noon to lifting broom or ladle, so much so that he often lost half his days to daydreams and willow-shade naps. One crisp morning, as mist curled over the fields, Jack's mother set a single silver coin upon the table. "Jack," she said, voice soft but firm, "run to the market and buy us fresh bread." He blinked once, twice, then gave a yawning stretch. "Very well, mother," he murmured, pocketing the coin and heading out, though not before pausing to spin once beneath the garden's willow branch. Down the lane he wove, stopping first to chase a dancing shaft of sunlight, then to marvel at a flicker of blue butterfly wings, until the market square lay before him. There, a baker's cart groaned with loaves warm, crusted, and golden. Jack approached and, with a grin, offered the shining silver coin. The baker weighed it in his palm, then frowned and shook his head. "This is only enough for a single roll," he said. Jack frowned in return. "A single roll?" he echoed. His mind flitted to the smell of porridge back home, and the thought of one little roll seemed too small. So, in a flash of bright mischief, Jack tapped the coin with a crooked finger and said, "Then I'll have one roll plus the baker's best muscatel grape." The baker burst out laughing, tore the roll in two, and threw a single grape on top for a silver coin and a pinch of cheek. Any baker might forgive a boy's bold spirit. Jack tucked the roll under one arm, the grape in his pocket, and set off home with a half smile and more than just stir in his belly. But as he passed the brook, the silver coin glinted in his pocket and whispered, "Spend me well, lazy Jack," and Jack, already dreaming of mischief, paused to wonder what magic a single shining coin might still hold. With the half-eaten roll and single grape stowed safely away, lazy Jack ambled toward home. The silver coin still nestled in his pocket, shimmering with possibility. Along the brook's mossy bank he came upon a wandering minstrel, a gentle young fiddler, weary from long roads, his case half empty, his bow tied. "Good day, sir," the fiddler sighed, resting on a sun-warmed stone. "My fingers ache, and my purse is bare. A single coin would bring me bread and let me play on through the night." Jack paused, recalling how a dash of daring won him that half-roll and grape. He touched the silver in his pocket and with a grin said, "I'll trade you this coin if you'll share your bow and teach me a tune." The fiddler's eyes brightened. He handed over the sturdy bow, took the coin, and struck a single, sweet note of sound as clear as a mountain spring. "My name is Roran," he said, showing Jack how to draw a gentle arc across the fiddle's strings. Jack, with fingers clumsy but eager, imitated the movement and coaxed from the fiddle a wobbling but joyful melody. They played together until the sun dipped low, Jack's laughter mingling with Rowan's music, and with every note, Jack felt the silver coins promise unfold new paths before him. As twilight settled, Rowan bid farewell, fiddle tucked under his arm, and Jack set off once more, this time carrying that strange, sweet tune in place of the silver coin and a newfound joy in his light, wandering step. The melody Rowan taught him echoed in lazy Jack's heart as he strolled beneath lantern-lit hedgerows, the silver coin long spent, the fiddle tune his richest treasure. But then, just beyond a moonlit meadow, he glimpsed his strained cart across the road, a donkey overloaded with sacks of wheat and the poor farmer struggling at the reins. Jack hurried forward. "Good sir, may I lend a hand?" The farmer sighed with relief. "My lad, if you guide my donkey home, I'll trade you this bag of fresh wheat for whatever you have of value." Jack's grin was bright. He tapped the coin's empty pocket and said, "I have naught but a tune." The farmer raised an eyebrow, but nodded, curious. All the way to the farmer's barn, Jack whistled the fiddle tune he learned, and as he did, the donkey's ears pricked, its step grew steady and sure, and the night breeze carried those cheerful notes like whispers through the fields. At journey's end, the farmer's eyes glistened. "You've calmed my donkey's fear with your song," he said softly, handing Jack the bag of golden wheat. "So take it, use it to feed your mother's hearth." Jack bowed deeply, his pockets now heavy not with silver, but with kernels shining like tiny suns. He tucked the wheat beneath his arm and made haste toward home, each step lighter than the last, his heart full of gratitude. When at last he reached the cottage door, his mother wiped her brow by lamplight. "My son," she exclaimed, "you've returned at last, and what brings you home so late?" Jack emptied the bag upon the table, wheat enough to fill their larder once more. He hummed a sweet fiddle tune, and his mother's eyes brightened with tears. "That melody," she said, "is worth more than any gold you could have carried." And so, lazy Jack, once known for idleness, became the boy whose clever heart and kind hands turned a single silver coin into friendship, music, and plenty. For in giving what he had of a tune, a kindness, he found a wealth that filled their home far more richly than silver ever could. Johnny Cake, in a humble coastal village where gulls called at dawn and fishing boats rocked on gentle waves, there lived a bright-eyed boy named Johnny. His mother baked each morning a thin, golden bread she called a Johnny Cake, for its shape, like a small round cake, and its warmth, like a mother's loving embrace. Yet Johnny, fickle as a summer breeze, refused to eat it. Each sunrise, his mother set a steaming plate before him, only to find it untouched while Johnny chased the morning's first crabs along the shoreline. "My Johnny," she sighed, "you must eat to grow strong." but Johnny would only shake his head, picking up a smooth pebble instead and tossing it into the tide. One misty morning, as Johnny wondered where seafoam met sand, he discovered a curious sight, a tiny hut built of driftwood, and above it, an elderly woman dressed in sea-green robes, her hair the color of seaweed. She stirred a bubbling batter in a hollowed mussel shell, and from its sweetness rose a scent so tempting it echoed his mother's warm kitchen. "Come closer, child," she whispered, voice soft as the waves. "Try this cake of grain and salt water," is called Johnny cake, but baked by the sea herself. Hesitant, Johnny nibbled a crumb and found its flavor both gentle and bold, like sweet rain upon some warm stones. "Eat more," the sea woman urged, offering him a small, round cake. Johnny bit again and felt a warmth spread through his chest, as though the sun had risen inside him. When the last crumb echoed away, the sea woman smiled. "Take the rest to your mother," she said, "and she will see true nourishment comes to those who taste both home and waves." With a heart lighter than the tide's breath, Johnny scooped the cakes into his arms and ran back down the shore, eager to share this sea-sweet gift. As Johnny raced up the sandy path, the driftwood cakes nestled in his arms until he burst into the small kitchen where his mother stood at the hearth. Her apron was flower white, her sleeves rolled high, and when she saw the round cakes glimmering like pale moons, her worried frown softened into surprise. "Johnny," she gasped, "where did these come from?" He placed them gently on the table. "I found a sea-wise woman by the tide," he said, "and she baked me Johnny cake of grain and salt water. Please taste one, mother." His mother broke a cake in two, and as she sampled its tender crumb and tasted its mild salt and sweetness, her eyes grew misty with wonder. "It's perfect," she whispered, for the first time in many mornings. Her heart, once weighed by worry, felt light with hope. Word of the miraculous cake spread quickly through the village's narrow lanes. Villagers paused their chores, fishermen mending nets, bakers kneading dough, weavers untangling yarn to taste Johnny's sea-baked gifts. Each found the cakes both filling and fine, nourishing them more deeply than simple flour alone. The fisherfolk felt steadier at the oar, the smiths steadier at the forge, and the children ran with laughter in their bones. That evening, beneath lantern-lit tables on the beach, the village gathered for an unexpected feast. Johnny's mother laid out baskets of mussels and kelp, crates of fresh fish and clams, and at the center, Johnny cake piled high like pale driftwood. As the villagers ate, Johnny watched their faces soften and shine, the sea's gift uniting hearth and wave, binding them in warmth and laughter. And in the crackle of the bonfire's glow, Johnny understood at last that a meal shared blossoms into something greater, a feast of home, of community, and of the magic born from kindness and the sea. As the embers of the beach bonfire glowed softly, the tide rose in gentle silver waves against the shore. Johnny watched the ocean's pulse, its rhythm like a lullaby for the sleeping village. His mother drew him close. "You have brought us both gift and lesson, Johnny," she whispered, her voice carried by the sea breeze. "Your cakes remind us that the land feeds our bodies, but the sea feeds our spirits." Johnny nodded, remembering the sea woman's eyes and the warmth that spread through him when he first tasted the salt-kissed cakes. He understood now that balance was the true magic, neither hearth nor tide alone could sustain the heart of their home. That night, as lanterns dimmed one by one, Johnny slipped away to the water's edge. He gathered seashore smooth as polished bone, driftwood pieces shaped by moonlit tides, and a single, perfect grain of golden wheat from the village's last harvest. In the hush, he arranged them upon a flat stone, a shell, a stick, and the grain symbols of sea, forest, and field. He knelt, touching each with gratitude, for hearth and tide, for home and wild. I honor both with humble heart. A soft splash answered him, and the sea woman emerged once more, her seaweed robes drifting like foam, her eyes bright beneath the moon. "You have learned well, Johnny Cake," she said, her voice echoing like waves on distant shores. "Blessed are those who cherish balance, for they hold the world's quiet harmony in their hands." She placed her hand upon his shoulder, and in that touch, Johnny felt the gentle strength of both ocean and earth. When she slipped back beneath the waves, the sea left behind a single gift, a small pouch of pearly salt, enough to flavor bread for many moons. Johnny rose, the pouch warm against his palm, and carried it home beneath dawn's pale light. He and his mother kneaded new loaves that morning, sprinkling each with these bright tears. Johnny Cake were born in perfect balance. From that day on, the village tables bobbed with river fresh fish and golden grain breads, each meal seasoned by the memory of a boy who found magic in the union of hearth and tide. And Johnny, once called lazy, became known as the keeper of balance, the boy whose taste for both land and sea nourished the community's heart for generations to come. Almar's daughter in a rugged coastal realm where grey cliffs met thrashing waves, there stood a mighty fortress of stone home to Almar, a lord both noble and wise, yet overshadowed by a silent sorrow. His only child, Princess Elsinore, was as spirited as the sea winds. Her laughter echoed like gulls' cries, and her hair glowed like sunset on the breakers. But one fateful eve, as the tempest raged beyond the battlements, Elsinore vanished without trace, her chamber empty, her silken robes untouched. Daylight found Earlmar weeping on the ramparts, his cries carried off by the howling wind. Night scoured the shores, seekers plunged into the foaming shallows, and mages peered into crystal orbs, yet no sign of the princess appeared. At last, beneath a storm-dark sky, Almar summoned his bravest knight, Sir Cadwin. "Knight," he said, voice breaking like an oar on stone, "find my daughter Elsinore, wherever she may be, whether beyond the edge of the world or in the clutches of some sea-born enchantment." Sir Cadwin, his armor glinting like moonlight on sword edge, swore the solemn oath, "Your Grace, I shall not rest until the princess is returned." And so, at dawn's first pale light, he mounted his steed and rode toward the cliff's jagged edge where the storm had swallowed Elsinore whole. Below the battlements, the sea roared its own lament, and Sir Cadwin felt in his breast the weight of a kingdom's hope. But far beyond the sight of sail or gull, a single gull circled, its cry sharp and solitary, as if beckoning him onward into a world where waves could speak and lost daughters awaited. Sir Cadwin guided his steed along the cliff-top path, the salt wind whipping his click into a banner of determination. Below him, waves crashed against crowded rocks, spraying silver foam that glimmered in the dawnlight. High overhead, the lone gull circled once more, its keen cry carrying like a whispered promise. Sir Cadwin raised his helm and called, "Guide me, noble bird." And with a final cry, the gull dipped sharply and vanished beyond a jutting headland. Sir Cadwin spurred forward, down a narrow track that wound between bramble and heather, until he stood before a hidden cove carved into shadowed stone. A roof of ebony rock arched above the black sand, and phosphorescent algae clung to walls like stars in a midnight sky. At the water's edge lay a small scaffold, yet seaworthy, its oars bound by seagrass. No mortal hand had touched the craft in many seasons, yet it bobbed gently as though inviting him aboard. Sir Cadwin climbed into the boat and pushed off, the gull's cry echoing behind him. Oars dipped into ink-dark water, and he rowed toward a ring of standing stones half submerged, their faces carved with strange runes that pulsed softly with the pale, otherworldly light. As he passed within their circle, the sky darkened, and the gull's cry transformed into human song, a lament of longing and loss. Sir Cadwin's heart quickened. He realized that these stones marked the threshold into the sea witch's realm, a place of enchantment and peril. Setting his jaw, he guided the skiff onward, where windless water lay still and mirror bright. There, at the edge of reflection and shadow, rose a labyrinth of coral spires, towers of living stone, twisting into impossibly fine tracery. From their depths came the wind-blown strains of a harp, each note tinged with sorrow. Sir Cadwin slipped from the boat and stepped onto the black sand, the labyrinth's entrance yawning before him like a hungry mouth. With sword in hand, he entered. Corridors of coral pressed close, their surfaces slick with brine. Every turn echoed with a distant melody, and every step seemed to draw him deeper into a living puzzle of corridors and dead ends. At last, he found his path barred by a pool of boiling water, steam rising like spirits caught between realms. Above it, on a ledge of carved mother of pearl, sat the sea witch herself, tall, slender, her hair a tide of black seaweed and her eyes glinting like pearls. Knight of the land, she crooned, why trespass in my coral maze? Your princess walls beyond, but at what cost? Sir Cadwin swallowed. My vow is iron true, he replied. I seek only to bring Elsinore home. The sea witch's laughter rippled through the cove. To earn her, you must give me something dear, a memory of your heart's first joy. Sir Cadwin's gaze flickered inward to the laughter of his childhood friend, the touch of his father's gentle hand, then still met sea foam in resolve. If memory is the toll, he said softly, I offer the day I first learned to love my home. He closed his eyes, and a golden shimmer rose from his breast, flowing into the witch's waiting palm. She inhaled the light, and as her smile softened, the boiling pool stilled into glass. A coral gate slid open beyond her throne, revealing a chamber of sea glass and moonbeams, and in its center, asleep upon a bed of driftwood and foam, lay Princess Elsinore, her hair fanned like sunlight on water, her arms still gleaming faintly in golden slumber. The witch rose, gliding to Sir Cadwin's side. You have paid my price, brave knight, she said. Now go, your princess awaits, but beware, the last crossing tests the heart alone. Sir Cadwin swept a bow, lifted the sleeping princess gently, and turned toward the labyrinth's heartless corridors. Behind him, the sea witch's harp fell silent, its final note lingering like a dream's farewell. Clutching Princess Elsinore in his strong arms, Sir Cadwin retraced his steps through the coral labyrinth, each whispering corridor now a reminder of the price he'd paid and the love that guided him. At the pool where steaming waters once raged, a final barrier shimmered into view, a gateway formed of living water, its surface reflecting both sky and seeded. No lever or spell could part its currents. Instead, a single inscription glowed upon the arch, only the truth of the heart may pass this tide. Sir Cadwin paused, the princess stirring softly. He looked into Elsinore's golden hair, her face serene even in slumber, and felt the promise he had whispered to his king, to protect her at all costs. Gathering his resolve, he knelt beside the tide. With a voice gentle yet certain, he spoke, By vow and love, I crossed the sea to bring you safely home to your family. As his words faded, the water's surface stilled. Slowly, it split apart an arching gate of liquid glass, and Sir Cadwin stepped through, carrying Elsinore to the waiting skiff. Beyond the standing stones, the lone gull circled once in triumph. Sir Cadwin lifted the princess, settled her beneath his cloak, and then he rowed with steady strokes back toward the thunderous cliffs. Dawn broke over the battlements of Elmar's fortress just as Cadwin scaled the final height. The queen, her tears like morning dew, raced down the walls, and the king, sword in hand, led a chorus of cheers that rose above the surf. Sir Cadwin set Elsinore gently at her parents' feet. Her eyes fluttered open, first surprise, then joy, and she smiled upon her father's outstretched arms. Elmar embraced his daughter, his own heart as radiant as the rising sun. To you, Sir Catwin, he proclaimed, my deepest gratitude and highest honor. You have braved sea and storm for love's true sake. Amid celebration and tears of relief, Princess Elsinore's right arm glittered once more, a beacon of hope restored. And as the tide's roar faded into cheers, the lone gull flew high above the ramparts, his cry echoing the kingdom's joy. Thus was the princess returned, the sea's enchantment undone by courage and truth, and Earl Mar's realm found peace again, forever bound by love that braved storm and tide. Mr. Micah, in a humble cottage on the fringe of a whispering wood, there lived a kind widow and her little son, Henry. Each evening she would tuck him into bed, kiss his brow, and softly whisper, "Sleep well, my dear, and don't let the shadows scare you." But Henry, bright-eyed and curious, would press his ear to the dark window pane, listening for the hoot of an owl or the rustle of leaves. One night, as a chill wind crept through the rafters, a low, rasping voice drifted into his room. "Henry, Henry, I'll come and snatch you, Mr. Micah." Henry froze, his heart pounding. He'd heard tales of Mr. Micah, a greedy old man who snatched naughty children and baked them into savory pies. But Henry was not naughty, at least, not that night, and besides, he was clever. He climbed from his bed, tiptoed across the floor, and peered through the crack in the door. Moonlight spilled across the hall, but no old man was there, only the hush of midnight. Snatching his quilt around him, Henry retreated to bed, but sleep would not come. He lay awake, eyes wide as saucers, wondering when the rasping voice would return. Henry lay very still, his quilt pulled tight beneath his chin, each breath a soft promise that he would not stir until he heard it again. A slow, scratching step at the foot of the stairs, then a low voice whispering his name, "Henry, Henry." The door creaked open. Moonlight stretched across the floorboards, and there, in the hallway's edge, stood a hunched figure in a ragged coat, Mr. Micah, his eyes glinting like embers. Henry's pulse quickened. He slipped from the bed, feet bare and silent, and crept toward the window. But Mr. Micah's keen ears caught the rustle. "Where are you, boy?" the villain rasped. Henry froze, then darted back into the darkness and squeezed behind a heavy wardrobe. Mr. Micah entered, his lantern casting long, trembling shadows. He sniffed the air, his crooked smile widening. "You can't hide forever, Henry." Henry held his breath as the lantern's glow drew nearer, illuminating his father's coat hanging upon the door. A plan sparked in his mind. Slowly, he slipped from behind the wardrobe and hopped into the coat sleeve, tucking himself in so snugly he felt nearly as solid as the wood beneath him. Mr. Micah paused, perplexed. He moved the coat's hem, peered inside, and found only empty folds. A chuckle escaped him. "Too clever, Henry." He seized the coat and marched down the hall, the lantern bobbing, its light dancing on the walls like worried ghosts. Henry's heart pounded, but he dared not breathe too loud. Outside the front door, Mr. Micah threw the coat over his shoulder and muttered, "Let's see where you scurried, boy." He descended the porch steps, and the chill night air swirled around the coat's hem. Henry's small hand gripped the fabric. He sensed the world outside, the whisper of wind, the distant call of an owl. With a trembling breath, Henry eased himself free, slipped from the sleeve, and crouched in the damp grass. Mr. Micah, none the wiser, clumped back inside, his lantern casting a final glow before the door swung shut. Henry stood under the silver moon, his quilt wrapped about his shoulders, and watched the cottage door. He knew Mr. Micah would return, but for now, he had escaped the ovens tuned by wit and quiet heart. Henry crouched in the cold grass, listening to the hush of the night. Mr. Micah's heavy boots receded inside, but the boy knew better than to return to bed. He gathered his quilt and crept back through the door, tiptoeing past the still sleeping hearth. In the kitchen, he found the largest pie tin, and with nimble fingers he rolled up 3 smooth river stones in an old cloth, smoothing the bundle to mimic a small, frightened child. Then, he placed the bundle beneath the low table where Mr. Mike often measured his gruesome goods and settled himself behind the pantry door to watch. Soon came the rasp of nails on wood and the lantern's glow hovering in the gloom. Mr. Micah entered, muttering, Henry, I'll bake you tonight." He sniffed the air and spotted the stones. "Aha," he rasped, "found you at last." The villain scooped the cloth bundle into his arms and carried it toward the hearth where the oven's iron door gaped wide, its warmth already faintly glowing. Henry held his breath. Mr. Micah tossed the bundle inside and slammed the door shut. A moment passed, then came a muffled thud. Mr. Mike peered through the oven's little window, expecting Henry's frightened face. Instead, the stones lay still, silent as midnight. Confused, he yanked open the door, only to have each heavy stone tumble at his feet with a clatter. Before he could recover, Henry sprang from shadow, quilt in hand, and seized a long-handled peel. "Your tricks won't frighten me," Henry declared, voice steady though small. With a swift movement, he nudged Mr. Micah toward the oven. The old man stumbled back, glancing wildly at the open flame. Henry pressed gently. "Perhaps you need a bit more baking yourself to learn what it feels like to be someone's feast." Mr. Micah's eyes widened as he realized the oven's warmth, and with a choked groan, he retreated, tripping over his own coat and sprawling onto the hearth's cold stones. Henry let out a relieved breath. He guided the disheveled villain to the door, shoved him gently into the night air, and whispered firmly, "Now go, never return, lest your own hunger draw you back." Mr. Mike scrambled to his feet and fled into the woods, his rasping threats fading like a bad dream. At last, Henry closed the door, hung his quilt back on the peg, and climbed into bed, his heart calm as the embers in the hearth. As dawn's first light touched the window pane, Henry's mother peeked inside, smiling at her son's bright, wakeful eyes. "Did you sleep well, my dear?" she asked. Henry nodded, tucking the quilt tight around him. "Never better," he whispered. And from that morning on, the rasp of Mr. Micah's voice disturbed the nights no more, for Henry's clever courage had sealed the oven's door against all dark designs. Whittington and his CAT in the bustling streets of medieval London, where timbered houses leaned toward each other and cobblestones sang under every footfall, there lived a poor youth named Richard Whittington. His clothes were threadbare, his shoes worn thin by many a mile, and he carried with him nothing but a humble bundle of meager rations. Yet in his heart burned a single hope, to find fortune in the great city, and perhaps one day to help his aging parents in the quiet village beyond the fields. At the market's edge, he came upon a ragged woman tending a roadside stall. "Good youth," she rasped, "will you spare a penny for an old crone's ale?" Whittington, though hungry himself, dropped his last farthing into her tin. She gave him a watery smile and in return handed him a small, sleek cat, its fur silvery as moonlight and its eyes bright as polished jet. "Take her," the woman whispered. "She'll bring you luck beyond all measure." Bewildered but touched by her grace, Richard tucked the cat beneath his cloak and continued toward the city gates. That night, he found lodging in a warren of wood and straw and, despite his meager supper, slept soundly with the cat curled at his feet. In the morning, he awoke to find the little creature gone, only a single paw print left on the windowsill. He set out to search the winding alleys, calling gently, "Here, kitty, kitty." But no silvery feline appeared until, atop a barrel outside the baker's shop, she sat, waiting serenely. From that day on, Whittington and the cat were inseparable. She trailed him through every street, her whiskers twitching at every shadow, her keen eyes watching with a wisdom beyond her size. And Richard, once alone and hungry, felt an unexpected warmth as though his fortunes, like his gentle companion, were ready to follow him into the dawn's first glow. From that morning onward, Whittington's fortunes began to stir not with cold, but with opportunity and quiet wonder. Each day he wandered the market stalls, the cat weaving at his feet, her tail held high like a banner of hope. Though his coin pittance was spent, he found odd jobs sweeping the cobbler's workshop, carrying fresh loaves for the baker, and dusting the books at the apothecary's store. With every task, the cat watched keenly, and Richard felt in his heart that she guided him towards something greater. One afternoon, as grey clouds gathered over the Thames, a royal messenger thundered down the lane, calling for stout sailors and swift-footed lads. "Who will join the king's merchant fleet?" he bellowed. "Riches and rank await the brave." Richard exchanged a glance with his feline friend. He recalled the old woman's promise, "Look beyond all measure." Gathering courage, he stepped forward. "I will serve," he said simply. Within the week, Whittington found himself aboard a grand merchant ship, its sails billowing like white swans against the sky. He learned quickly hauling lines, swabbing decks, and in ports far and wide, he sold the cat's fine fur for small sums of silver. Always, the cat sat poised amid the rigging, her emerald eyes scanning horizons for unseen shores, as though she knew the way to fortune. On a silent morning in a distant harbour, the ship's captain called Richard to the quarterdeck. "A storm is upon us," he warned, "and only quick thinking can save our cargo." As thunder rolled and waves lashed the planks, Richard climbed the lash-licked ropes, the cat at his side, and together they unraveled tangled sheets and secured the flapping sails. With each knot he tied, the storm's fury eased as if the cat's presence tamed the wind itself. When at last the seas grew calm, the grateful captain pressed a heavy purse into Richard's hand, enough silver to set father and mother at ease for many seasons. Richard bowed low, his heart swelling with gratitude. He knew, too, that true riches lay not in coin alone, but in courage, compassion, and quiet loyalty. As the merchant ship turned its prow toward home, Richard stood at the rail, the salt breeze in his hair, his faithful cat purring at his side. He looked to the horizon where sky met sea and understood at last the cat's true gift, a guiding star through every storm, and a promise that fortune favors those who journey with a loyal heart. When the merchant ship at last docked in London's busy harbour, Richard Whittington stepped onto the plank a changed man, no longer a penniless youth, but a sailor seasoned by storm and sea. His purse was heavy with silver, yet he first sought his humble cottage where his mother waited by the hearth, her eyes bright with relief. He pressed a handful of coins into her hand and whispered, "All is well now, mother," for he knew her love had steadied him through every gale. His mother smiled through tears, blessing the cat she had once thought astray, now revealed as the guardian of her son's destiny. Word of Richard's wise handling of the storm and his silver bounty spread swiftly through London's lanes and gilded halls. Merchants and aldermen, impressed by tales of the boy and his uncanny feline guide, invited him into their councils. Richard, ever humble, brought the cat to every meeting, where her keen gaze seemed to see through every leger's claim and soften the hardest of debates. In time, the city's greatest post became vacant, the office of Lord Mayor of London. The councillors needed a leader of integrity, courage, and compassion, qualities Richard had shown on deck and in council alike. So they turned to the young man with the cat at his side and, to the surprise of many, chose him as their mayor. On the day of his inauguration, Sir Richard Whittington, no longer lazy Jack of the streets, rode in a gleaming carriage, his mother and the faithful cat beside him. Crowds lined the square, cheering as he passed, for they had witnessed his humble rise and the cat's mysterious, guiding presence. As Lord Mayor, Whittington presided over fairs and feasts, healed the poor with silver he shed, and mended disputes with the wisdom he had gained at sea. And when councillors debated long into candlelight, he stroked the cat's soft fur, finding calm in her silent confidence. Years later, a statue stood in London's heart, capturing Richard Whittington in his mayoral robes, one hand raised in benediction, the other gently touching the cat at his feet. Beneath the stone, an inscription read, "Here lies Sir Richard Whittington, who rose from humble street to noble seat, guided by loyalty, kindness, and a cat's quiet heart." And to this day, when the city's bells chime at dawn, some say a silver paw print glimmers on the statue's base, a reminder that true fortune favors not just the brave, but the faithful companions who walk beside us through every storm and into every sunrise. The strange visitor on a windswept moor, half hidden by swirling mist, stood Ravenscroft Manor, an ancient house of ivy-clad stone and shuttered windows. Its solitary occupant, Lady Arabella Ravenscroft, lived in quiet seclusion, her only company the howling wind and the distant call of night-prowling elves. One stormy evening, as thunder rolled over the turrets, Arabella sat beside her hearth, reading by flickering candlelight. A sudden knock at the grand oaken door made her start, for rarely did she welcome visitors. She hesitated, then rose, candle in hand, and crossed the echoing hall to enter. On the threshold stood a tall stranger, a man in a cloak the color of raven's wings, his face half hidden beneath a hood. He carried no lantern, yet his eyes shone with an uncanny glow. "Forgive me," he said in a voice like distant thunder. "I seek shelter from the storm and offer in return a tale you may find most curious." Arabella, her heart fluttering with both fear and intrigue, stepped aside. "Enter, then," she murmured, "and warm yourself by the fire." The stranger moved into the circle of firelight, his cloak settling like a shadow upon the rug. Arabella closed the door against the storm's howl and returned to the hearth, pouring 2 cups of fragrant tea to chase away the night's chill. He accepted one with a polite nod and studied her manner's silent grandeur, the high, timbered ceilings, the tapestries of forgotten battles, and the portrait of her ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow his every move. Arabella regarded him closely in return. His features were handsome yet worn, as though carved by both wind and sorrow. At last she asked softly, "Why do you call your story curious, stranger?" He set down his teacup and drew a deep breath, the lamplight dancing in his eyes. "My tale begins here, within these very walls," he murmured. "The generations past, your family safeguarded the secret of the moor, an ancient well whose waters could awaken what sleep had bound, but greed and fear betrayed that gift, and the well was walled and forgotten, its blessings lost to time." Arabella's heart stuttered. She had heard whispers in the village, tales of a hidden spring that once healed broken spirits, but dismissed them as legend. The stranger continued, "Tonight, the waters call again, the bond between moor and manor grows thin, and soon the rain will overrun the walls to reclaim what was buried." He rose, and in the amber glow, Arabella saw the silver amulet hanging at his throat, a leaf-shaped charm etched with a droplet of water. "To halt the rising waters," he said gravely, "someone must journey to the old well, beneath the ruined chapel on the far side of the moor, and release its waters into the stream, setting free its ancient power once more." Arabella's pulse quickened. "The path is treacherous," she whispered. "The moor at midnight is alive with hungry mists." He offered her his hand, gentle yet unwavering. "Will you entrust me, Lady Ravenscroft?" he asked. "I cannot do this alone." For a heartbeat, Arabella hesitated. Her life had been one of caution and solitude. Yet in the stranger's gaze flickered a promise, the chance to restore her family's legacy and save her cherished home from the flood to come. She laid her hand in his, feeling a curious warmth despite the chill in the hall. "Then lead on," she said softly, "and I will follow." Outside, the storm raged anew, but within Ravenscroft Manor's half-lit walls, two souls rose to meet in the ancient duty to uncover the well and to awaken its healing waters before them or reclaim them all. Beneath the storm-beaten eaves of Ravenscroft Manor, Arabella and the cloaked stranger gathered their cloaks and lanterns, hearts steady with purpose. Through the howling wind and drumming rain, they stepped onto the flooded moor, each fitful of promise against the rising tide. The stranger's lantern cast a trembling glow over reeds and shallow pools, guiding them toward the ruined chapel whose walls once echoed with whispered prayers. Between broken pillars draped in moss, they found the heavy oak door swollen by water and time. Together, they forced it open, lantern light spilling into a nave of fallen stone. At its center, half submerged in murky water, lay the ancient well, ringed by carved gliss and crowned with ivy. Arabella's breath caught. "It's still here," she whispered, voice echoing on wet stone. The stranger set down his cloak and drew the silver amulet from his neck. Holding it aloft, he chanted words older than the manor walls, his voice rising above the wind's lament. The amulet's droplet motif glowed with cool light, and the well's water trembled in response. Arabella stepped forward, lantern lowered, and saw the gliss begin to shimmer as though waking from a long slumber. Slowly she placed her hand upon the first symbol and felt its gentle pulse, like a heartbeat from the earth itself. The water at their feet shifted, clearing to reveal smooth stones beneath. Then, with a soft sigh as though the chapel itself exhaled, the waters began to flow upward, poured from the well's hidden spout in a steady stream of silver light. Outside, the floodwaters that had threatened the manor receded before an unseen current, returning to their secret bed beneath the moor. Inside, Arabella and the stranger watched as the well's glow reached into every corner of the ruined chapel, renewing its stones and stirring the sweet scent of wildflowers long gone. When at last the water stilled, the stranger turned to Arabella, eyes softened by the lantern's glow. "The legacy is restored," he said. "Your family's gift returns to the land, and Ravenscroft shall stand for centuries more." Arabella found her voice. "Why have you helped me, stranger?" He smiled beneath his hood, the amulet's glow fading gently. "Because some gifts like loyalty and courage are their own reward, and now my journey brings me back to the whispering tides from which I came." As dawn's first pale light crept through the chapel's broken windows, the stranger slipped away into the mist, leaving Arabella alone with the awakened well and its promise of protection. When she returned to the manor, the floodwaters had all but disappeared, the moor now glistening in gentle sunlight. At the hearth that evening, she placed a silver amulet upon the mantel where its soft glow reminded her that even the wildest storms can be calmed by courage, trust, and a strange visitor's timely grace. The lately worm of Spindleston Hugh in the Northumbrian hills where sea breeze meets heath, stood Spindleston Hugh, a lonely, rocky crag. Below it flowed a river swift and cold, and at its foot lay a castle proud and old. Within those stone-cold walls lived Sir Frith, the noble earl, and his only daughter, fair Princess Margaret, whose beauty shone like moonlight on the waves, her laughter bright as larks at dawn's first break. Yet envy lurks where light is brightest still, for Margaret's stepmother, Lady Helen, sought power over both castle and king, and in her heart she cherished jealousy. One moonless night, beneath the crumbling tower, Lady Helen whispered words of ancient power, drawing a rune and circle, calling forth a spell to bind the princess in a loathsome, hidden hell. At midnight stroke, Sir Frith's beloved child was changed in form, her gentle shape defiled, her skin grew scales, her arms became a coiled tail, and where her beauty bloomed, a serpent's head hissed in the torchlight, crowned with dreadful dread. Thus Margaret became the lately loathsome worm, a dragon wretched in her family's form, banished to the rocky ledges high, her tears like pearls beneath the starless sky. Sir Frith wept tears like summer's softened rain, but could not break the foul enchantress' chain. And Lady Helen watched her cunning plan complete, her rival vanquish, her triumph bittersweet. Yet in the dark, the river's whispered voice spoke of a cure beyond the witch's choice. A kiss from one whose heart was pure and strong would break the spell and right the grievous wrong. So word was sent through neighboring towns and lands, that any man of courage, true in hands unstained, might climb the Hugh, confront the lady beast, and free the princess from her serpent's leash. And many came with sword and silver pride, yet turned away, too fearful of the worm's fierce hider, until one only rose against the knight, Sir Donald, nephew to the grieving earl's own might, resolved to scale the crags and tempt his fate, and bring his cousin home before too late. Sir Donald steeled his heart at dawn's first light, strap hang on his sword with hands both firm and white. He bade farewell to loyal friends below, and climbed the winding path where cold winds blow. The cracked sheer face rose like a challenge bold, each jagged edge a test of spirit cold. Yet Donald's faith was staunch, his purpose clear, to save his cousin's life from doom so near. At last, he reached the summit's lonely height, where the lately worm lay coiled in deathless night. Her scales gleamed green as moss upon the stone, her emerald eyes unblinking as a throne. She hissed a warning smoke of malice could have, and raised her tail as if to scourge the world. Sir Donald met her gaze, unflinching, strong, and lifted high his sword in faithful song. They battled long beneath the storm-scarred sky. His blade rang steel against her hard armor tied, her tail whipped wind, her hiss froze blood to ice, yet Donald's courage glowed with softer light. At last, he saw within her serpent's eyes a flicker of the princess' human guise, her pain, her sorrow, buried deep within the lovely form that served her stepmother's sin. With gentle step, he laid his sword aside, and knelt before the dragon's scaly hide. He spoke her name Margaret in tender tone, and placed a single kiss upon her snout of stone. For in that kiss of love, the spell unravelled, the lately form was shattered and unravelled. Her scales fell like leaves upon the wind, and Margaret stood forth, her true self pinned no more by Helen's curse of ancient might. Her eyes shone bright as dawn, her spirit light. Sir Donald caught her in his arms so brave, and wept for joy that she was freed from the grave. Behind them, thunder broke in swirling rain, but in their hearts, the storm was loosened from its chain. Together, they descended from the crag of the princess, safe from darkness cold and drab. Yet as they walked toward the castle gate, a final trial awaited her cruel stepmother's hate, as Sir Donald and Princess Margaret descended spindles and Hugh. The storm's fury gave way to gentle showers, and the mist parted to reveal the distant towers of Ravenscourt Castle, whose banners flew half-mast in sorrow. When they reached the castle gates, Sir Frith stood with tear-stained cheeks, his sword at rest, his heart pounding with both relief and fear. Beside him, the courtiers and guards formed a trembling ring, awaiting news of the lately worm's fate. Margaret, clad once more in silken gown, stepped forward on unsteady feet. "My father," she murmured, voice clear as summer water, "I return to you, freed by courage and love's true kiss." Sir Frith embraced his daughter, and Donald bowed low in humble triumph. But their joy was tempered by the darker need to confront the source of Margaret's suffering, Lady Helen, the stepmother whose envy had unleashed the curse. They found Lady Helen in the great hall, her once proud posture now great and shrunken, the weight of her wrongs etched upon her face. As Margaret entered, Helen's eyes met the princess's with a flicker of fear, for the ancient magic she had wielded now lay shadowed like the serpent scales upon the crowd. Margaret spoke, her voice both gentle and firm. "Stepmother, your business wrought pain beyond measure, yet I offer you mercy, that this house may know peace." Lady Helen sank to her knees, tears genuine now streaming down her cheeks. "In my jealousy I was blind," she whispered. "Forgive me, daughter, if you can." Sir Fred raised his hand in solemn consent, and the court, once divided by fear, breathed as one in hopeful relief. The curse lifted, the air felt lighter, and wherever Lady Helen's tears fell, tiny buds of wildflowers sprang from the flagstones. That eve, a great feast was held in Ravenscourt's halls. The tables bowed beneath roasted venison, golden barley loaves, and sweetmeat sparkling like captured sunlight. Margaret sat beside her father, and Donald her champion beside her still, while Lady Helen offered thanks that her family's bond had been restored. Beneath vaulted ceilings, laughter rose like birdsong, and through the hall's open windows, the most silver winds carried away the last echoes of the Lady Worm's lament. In the days that followed, the well at Spindleston Heugh was tended once more, its clear waters cherished for their healing touch, and the tale of the disguised princess saved by bravery, love, and mercy became legend across the northern lands, a reminder that even the darkest curses can be undone by the gentle power of forgiveness. Thank you for sharing this quiet moment with me. May your dreams be soft and kind, full of gentle adventures and star-bright hope. Rest now, and know you are safe, wrapped in magic and calm until morning light. If tonight's story warmed your heart, please tap like, subscribe, and ring the bell to join me for more bedtime journeys. Share your thoughts or story requests in the comments. I love hearing from you. Until next time, sleep sweetly, dear friend.